Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shannon Medill. Shannon Medill was born in 1989 in Alberta, Canada. She spent years honing her acting skills. Her journey was challenging, but she was ready to start a new chapter in her life. On November 26, 2014, Shannon auditioned and was selected. But before she could celebrate her achievement, she disappeared without a trace. After a day passed without Shannon returning home, her family's worries grew as no one could reach her. Shannon's family was confused. Not knowing what could have happened, they called her cell phone, sent messages on all social media platforms, and left emails. But Shannon did not respond. Her behavior was unusual and completely out of character. Shannon's family contacted the police, but they stressed that Shannon was an adult who had the right to come and go without informing anyone. However, Shannon's family insisted that this behavior was out of character for her and that a search had to be launched. Fearing that something terrible might have happened, Shannon was the youngest of 4 children. From a young age, she loved being the center of attention and was very creative. She loved to sing and began performing in small shows in kindergarten. Showcasing her acting talent during her school years, ultimately did not complete her studies. Choosing instead to focus on her acting skills, Shannon spent her days attending auditions and interviews, but she was constantly rejected. However, during this time, she found an opportunity in comedy and began performing stand-up, which helped her become famous in 2010. When Shannon turned 21, she attended a party with friends to relax there. She met Joshua Burgess. He was quite different from Shannon, but they quickly connected, and these differences eventually helped balance each other out. The couple enjoyed spending time together, watching TV and playing video games. They shared many interests, which strengthened their relationship. After 4 years of dating, the couple decided to get married. In May 2014, Shannon began planning her wedding. With Joshua's active support, their wedding, attended by only their closest family members, was a joyous event. However, the couple did not seem completely happy. Over the next month, Shannon focused on her acting career, attending more auditions, some of which took place in Edmonton, a city 3 hours north of Calgary, where she lived with her husband. This meant she spent a lot of time traveling between the two places. Shannon has appeared in numerous television shows, voiced audiobooks, and even acted in plays. She has often expressed her belief that great success awaits her in Edmonton. On November 26, 2014, 25-year-old Shannon and her brother Brett had planned to meet at the Calgary Theatre. Prior to their meeting, Shannon had auditioned for a show and she was accepted. Marking a major milestone in her journey to pursue her dreams, Brett was waiting for Shannon at the theater, and he understood how important the event was to her. As the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew. He couldn't reach her. Shannon ignored his messages. Eventually, he had no choice but to leave. He tried calling her the next morning, but she still didn't answer. Brett contacted their parents, but they were also confused about the situation. His mother suggested that Shannon's work schedule might have changed. She mentioned that sometimes, when Shannon worked the night shift, she would sleep during the day. However, this explanation didn't seem plausible. Shannon usually paid attention to her phone calls because it was important for her to stay in touch and not miss anything significant. To reassure herself, their mother thought that when Shannon woke up in the evening, she would realize she had missed the calls and would eventually call back. A voicemail message was left for Shannon, and her family assured her that they were not angry with her. They just wanted her to let them know she was safe. Unfortunately, she did not respond. Worried that something was wrong, her relatives, including her husband Joshua, went to the police for help. They reported her missing and speculated that she might have been in an accident while traveling to or from Edmonton. Initially, the police were slow to act on their request, but after some persuasion, they began to get involved. Eventually, the police launched a search operation. Hospitals were checked, but no accidents were reported that day. The following days were a blur. Family members anxiously awaited any news. During this time, Shannon did not shop, did not use any credit cards, and there were no activity records on her car. As if she had disappeared, she also stopped using her social media accounts, where she often shared updates about her acting career. Unexpectedly, a few days later, Joshua reported to the police that he had found Shannon's cell phone in her pants pocket at home. He also discovered her car, but the police did not find anything suspicious. Nearly 2 weeks passed without any news until the police found some unusual photos. 2 photos of a girl with her hair covering her face were found attached to a tree in a Calgary park, although the identity could not be confirmed. The girl bore a strong resemblance to Shannon, especially due to her bright red hair. It appeared that a potential kidnapper was taunting the police. Search efforts were organized in Big Sugar Creek, one of Canada's largest parks. Several teams were formed, including volunteers and Shannon's family members. For 2 days, police scoured a large area, assisted by specially trained dogs and a rescue helicopter that surveyed the park from the air. Unfortunately, these efforts were unsuccessful. It was later discovered that the images that prompted the search were part of an art project created by local university students. Realizing that their photos had been mistakenly taken as evidence in connection with the case, the students contacted the police to clarify the situation. During this time, her family anxiously awaited news, but there were no clues regarding Shannon's whereabouts. It was unclear whether she would ever be found alive. The idea of a kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no ransom was demanded, nor had the family been contacted. Joshua revealed a previously unknown fact to the police. He explained that his wife had been struggling with her acting career for years. One evening, she called him and confessed that she had considered jumping off a bridge during a particularly difficult time. She had just suffered another disappointment after auditioning for a role in a television series she had hoped to land. Fortunately, she was able to overcome the emotional pain, but she later suffered a nervous breakdown. The police were concerned that such a traumatic experience might have led her to consider end life. Police and divers searched rivers in the area, hoping to find any sign of her. Unfortunately, despite exhaustive searches along the riverbank for miles, they found no clues, and the investigation hit a dead end. By May 2015, nearly 6 months after Shannon disappeared, the police still had no clue as to her whereabouts. During this time, an experienced police officer named Christine took over the investigation, having worked in the homicide division for many years. She was known for her determination and attention to detail. Her previous efforts had led to the arrest of many dangerous criminals, and she was committed to solving this case. Christine decided to investigate those close to Shannon. She wanted to learn more about her husband, Joshua. From the beginning, he seemed like a kind and positive person. He cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his home twice and readily answering their questions. He also supported Shannon's family when they went to the police station to report her disappearance. Even after she went missing, the family kept in touch with Joshua, comforting each other and holding out hope. When asked about the possibility that Joshua was involved in Shannon's disappearance, all of her relatives responded that he could never hurt his wife. However, during discussions with Shannon's family about her husband, Joshua, the police made a surprising discovery. The couple had been married for over 7 months at the time of the tragic events, but it was only now, 6 months after Shannon's disappearance, that it was revealed that they had an open marriage. This meant that they were in an unconventional relationship where both Joshua and Shannon could have other partners. Joshua claimed that he proposed this arrangement and that Shannon agreed. Although she did not seem particularly interested in it, Shannon's family was also aware of the arrangement. This arrangement allowed Joshua and Shannon to explore their private lives more freely, especially when Joshua was dating other women. According to Joshua, they had no disputes about their open marriage. Surprisingly, Shannon knew about all of her husband's affairs and had even met some of his girlfriends. Officer Christine discovered that Joshua had had about 7 affairs during their marriage. It was important to interview all of his girlfriends. The police were then able to locate and question them without any difficulty, according to the investigation. Joshua's last girlfriend shared some intriguing details. She continued to see him even after Shannon went missing. This girlfriend revealed information that the police had never heard before. They discovered that just before Shannon went missing, there had been a serious conflict between her and Joshua concerning the openness of their relationship. When Shannon decided to end their open marriage, Joshua's girlfriend stated that to avoid further conflict, he agreed with Shannon's decision. However, a week later, Shannon discovered that Joshua was still in contact with his girlfriend. Despite his promise to end the relationship, she found out because he had locked his phone, which was unusual, as they had previously been free to check each other's devices. When Joshua gave her the password, Shannon discovered that instead of breaking up with his mistress, he had decided to marry her, making Shannon the second person in his life. Joshua claims he is planning to file for divorce soon. Shannon felt deeply betrayed after throwing away Joshua's phone. She carefully considered her situation and made some important decisions, including moving from Calgary to Edmonton. She was in the process of implementing this plan at the time of her disappearance. During this period, she continued to live with Joshua, but they arranged their schedules to avoid seeing each other. Their relationship was extremely strained. Shannon often worked night shifts, while Joshua had a completely different schedule, causing them to barely see one another, according to the investigation. Shannon's life ended on November 27, 2014. After that day, all her banking transactions stopped. She ceased using the internet, and her phone went silent at noon. However, a signal from her phone was detected in an alley in the city the next morning. Joshua later claimed that he had found the phone at home. Interestingly, a few days later, Joshua also discovered Shannon's car, but could not explain how he found it. All of this seemed very suspicious to Officer Christine. Christine decided to speak to Joshua again. Meanwhile, an application to confiscate Joshua's phone had been filed, as he was increasingly considered a prime suspect in Shannon's case. In addition, the police decided to confiscate the car. On June 2, 2015, 7 months after Shannon's disappearance, Police Christine, along with other police, went to Joshua's house. They brought a search warrant to confiscate his cell phone and car. The officers knocked on the door and asked to enter the house. But initially, Joshua did not answer. After a while, he responded to the police and announced that he would be coming out soon. It appeared that Joshua was moving around inside, possibly trying to buy time to hide something. He answered the second police call, but explained the delay by saying that he was looking for his pants. Joshua spoke from behind a closed door and was asked to come out. Regardless of his appearance, the police sensed that something important was happening inside. They were prepared for any eventuality, including the use of weapons. Suddenly, he burst into tears and confessed to killing Shannon. After some persuasion, he finally opened the door. The police entered and saw Joshua bleeding. On the floor next to him was a military knife, which he had used to commit end life. He was rushed to the hospital. Joshua had lost a significant amount of blood, but he was not in critical condition and did not require surgery. The doctors were able to stitch up his wound. A psychiatric evaluation was needed to determine whether he was a danger to himself or others. When Joshua was taken into the interrogation room, he only said that he would confess his love to Shannon if he could see her alive, and he did not say anything else. Meanwhile, the police searched Joshua's home with the help of sniffer dogs. Later, they discovered a body buried in the yard, and during the excavation, they found enough evidence to secure a conviction. However, they still wanted to obtain a confession and hear Joshua's account of the events. On the second day after his arrest, Joshua provided a detailed account of the events on the day Shannon went missing. He returned home and found her sitting on the couch. She appeared very upset and immediately accused him of cheating, calling him a traitor for the affair. In a fit of rage, she lost control and said many harsh words to him. Unable to bear her accusations, Joshua tried to cover her mouth with his hand. In response, Shannon bit him and continued to insult him, expressing her disgust at his attempts to touch her. In a fit of rage, Joshua grabbed Shannon by the neck and began to strangle her until she stopped breathing. When he realized she was dead, he became frightened and was unable to call an ambulance because she was dead. When Joshua recounted this, he became emotional, cried, and clearly felt remorse for his actions. Finally, the confession brought him relief after 8 long months of carrying this secret. During this time, Shannon's body lay in their home. Despite being checked twice by the police, they ignored the containers on the back porch, which were hidden under trash bags to avoid detection. Joshua Burgess was charged with second-degree murder. Shannon's family eventually learned the truth about what had happened, shocking everyone to discover that the killer had been near them the entire time. Even helping to find Shannon, Joshua's trial attracted considerable public and media attention. Despite his remorse, Joshua did not want to make his confession public and refused to attend the trial. Shannon's family believed that he was a coward who did not dare to face Shannon's loved ones. The prosecutor's office and the family contended that it was a premeditated murder and that he was still trying to hide the evidence. He acted as if nothing had happened. Hoping to escape prosecution and punishment at the last minute, the jury found Joshua Burgess guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 10 years, the family of the Shannon was unhappy with this sentence. They believed that it was Joshua's lifestyle that led to the end of Shannon's life. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Knight and Renee Aitken. Samantha Knight was born in 1977. She lived with her parents in the suburbs of Menly, Australia. But her parents' relationship did not last long, and they divorced. Then, she and her mother moved to Bronte. When she was in 6th grade, they relocated again, this time to Bondi, a suburb of Sydney, where they settled in an apartment on Imperial Street. Their lifestyle was modest. Her mother worked long hours, which forced her to be independent. Her father frequently visited and provided financial support. On August 19th, Samantha, a schoolgirl, turned 9 years old. After classes ended at 4 p.m., she returned home around 4:15 p.m., while her mother was still at work. In the 1980s, it was common in the suburbs to use simple door latches. The neighborhood was calm and safe, and everyone knew each other, allowing children to stay home alone in locked houses while their parents worked. This was considered normal, so Samantha had the freedom to come and go from their apartment while her mother was at work. August 19th was just like any other day. After school, Samantha changed into a pink skirt, a dark blue jumper, and blue sandals before heading out for a walk. A few hours later, her mother, Tess Knight, returned home from work and found a half-eaten sandwich in the kitchen, but little girl was missing. Tess wasn't initially worried, as it was common for Samantha to go for walks with friends and sometimes skip meals to do so. She continued with her evening routine, expecting her daughter to return soon. However, as it got darker, Tess began to feel anxious. Samantha usually came home before dark, and her absence was concerning. She decided to search for her daughter. Since they had recently moved to the area, not many people knew her, making the search more difficult. She asked neighbors, acquaintances, and Samantha's friends if they had seen her, but no one had any information, which heightened her alarm. Without a mobile phone, she couldn't call Samantha or track her whereabouts. When she returned home, Tess checked again to see if Samantha had come back while she was out, but she was still missing. In a state of urgency, she called emergency services to report her daughter's disappearance, Samantha. Soon after, the police came to her house. They spoke with she to gather details about Samantha's disappearance. She was confused and said she didn't know what had happened because she was at work. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the area, so the police had to rely on tips from witnesses who might have seen something unusual. Police immediately interviewed neighbors, friends, family members of Samantha and anyone nearby for clues. Several store employees reported seeing the girl. Samantha had visited at least 3 different sections of the store selling office supplies, and she was last seen walking down the street. Some witnesses thought she might have been talking to a man. However, they did not find anything suspicious. The police had no other leads. They thoroughly searched the area and followed the route Samantha had taken, but they did not find anything relevant to the investigation. The public was soon informed about the incident. The police requested assistance from local residents through the media, sharing Samantha's photo and description of clothing. Local residents acted quickly. The very next day, hundreds of volunteers participated in a search operation throughout the city. The media also extensively covered this tragic incident. The possibility that Samantha had left home was not even considered. She was too young. At her age, kids typically do not run away from home to spend time with friends. All of her belongings were still at home, and she had never displayed any rebellious behavior before. Samantha was a sweet, kind, and calm girl who worked hard in school, leading detectives to believe she had been kidnapped, possibly taken from her home by someone who maliciously opened the door. Local residents is extremely uneasy. There had never been a kidnapping in their quiet suburb. Residents began to scrutinize one another, fear that the criminal may be living in their area. Investigators had little information to investigate, relying mainly on interviews with local shopkeepers. Unfortunately, no one could provide useful leads to help locate Samantha. The investigation was further complicated because in the 1980s and 1990s, methods of tracking missing persons were not well developed. There were no alert systems like Amber Alerts, no DNA testing, and other modern investigative techniques. Therefore, law enforcement agencies need to conduct searches as efficiently as possible. For instance, they created a mannequin dressed like Samantha the day she disappeared to help jog the memories of those who witnessed it, but this did not produce the expected results. Tess was heartbroken. Samantha's father also joined the search for daughter. Initially, he was even considered a suspect, as investigators thought he might have kidnapped his daughter to keep her with him. However, he denied these accusations. He explained that he maintains a peaceful and respectful relationship with his ex-wife and sees his daughter regularly. There was no reason for him to kidnap her. When the investigation gets difficult, detectives must try their best to identify suspects. The relatives of Samantha began to lose hope of finding her alive and feared the worst. Police are also leaning towards the theory that the girl may have died, possibly taken by human traffickers and taken to another country. This theory was explored, but for 12 years, there is no evidence to confirm this. When the police received a significant lead from a woman, they focused on a local resident named Michael Guider. He lived near where Samantha had disappeared, had been in prison since 1996 for child rape and may be a suspect in Samantha's disappearance. Michael's life is full of disgusting incidents. Born in 1950, he grew up in Melbourne with an alcoholic mother and a younger brother named Tim, born in 1953. Eventually, their mother sent them to an orphanage, where Michael faced further sexual abuse from older children, many of whom were under the influence of drugs. Other children also suffered violence, including Tim, but they all remained silent due to threats. Michael's mental health becomes increasingly serious, and as he matures, he begins to negatively impact the other children in the orphanage. When he was 15 years old, he escaped and began a life of petty crime. His younger brother, Tim, no better, he committed armed robbery and was imprisoned for it. After serving his time, Tim seemed to reform. He became a sculptor, got married, and had children, staying out of trouble and off criminal records. In contrast, Michael continued his criminal activities and showed no intention of changing. He never held a steady job and only worked part-time as a gardener, mowing lawns for neighbors. Michael's first arrest came in the 1970s, when he was charged with setting fire to a store. As an adult, he developed a passion for Australian Aboriginal culture and became knowledgeable about rock art. However, in 1996, he was convicted of sexual offenses for molesting 11 children, aged 2 to 16. At least 60 similar charges were brought against him. Some sources suggested that the actual number of victims could be much higher. During the investigation into the child abuse cases, Michael quickly cooperating with the police. This was taken into account during the sentencing. As a result, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Michael usually acts in a consistent manner. He targeted vulnerable single mothers, often those who struggled with alcohol or drug addiction, or those who were easily influenced. By building trust with these women, he presented himself as kind and courteous, manipulating their perceptions to lower their guard. He often sought opportunities to be alone with their children, claiming he wanted to care for them while their mothers were away. Mothers noticed his attentive behavior and had no qualms about leaving him with their children. By posing as a caregiver, he gained access to the children, which he exploited. Michael would give the children Coca-Cola that was laced with sleeping pills. Once they were unconscious, he photographed and sexually assaulted them. Eventually, some children had the courage to tell their mothers about Michael, and the truth was revealed that he was acting like a serial predator. When the police searched his home, they discovered a large stash of photos, numbering in the thousands. Several photos showed instances of sexual abuse while the victim was unconscious, including images of Samantha and one of her friends without clothes. In one of the photos, police discovered the best friend of Samantha. At that time, she was already 21 years old, and detectives attempted to speak with her. However, both she and her mother refused to cooperate. Eventually, they were summoned to court and compelled to testify. Investigators are looking into a connection between Michael, a serial rapist, and Samantha's disappearance. Among the evidence found, police discovered a peculiar album containing newspaper clippings about missing children, including Samantha. Detectives were curious about why he kept these clippings. Normally, criminals often do this to gather mementos related to their crimes. During questioning, Michael claimed he was simply interested in unsolved cases out of curiosity. While this album was not a major issue, when combined with other elements of his criminal record, it raised serious concerns. After reviewing all the evidence, including photographs of violent scenes, police filed 11 additional charges against him. The total sentence for these new crimes was 6.5 years. At that time, investigators were unable to charge Michaels with kidnapping Samantha, but they suspected his involvement in her disappearance and continued to monitor him. While he was in prison, police observed that he was beaten during all interrogations. He endured severe mistreatment, his cellmates attacked and assaulted him, and the guards failing to intervene. In 2000, journalist Denise Hoffman wrote a book about the missing child, Samantha. She was personally acquainted with Michael and highly appreciated his work as a renowned expert on Australian Aboriginal life. He was knowledgeable in this field and had appeared on television. However, despite their friendship and his expertise, Denise had strong reasons to believe that he was linked to the case of Samantha's disappearance. She begins investigating on her own after he confides in her about his wife, who also knows Samantha's mother. Denise noticed that Michael's demeanor changed significantly whenever the conversation shifted to Samantha's case. During these discussions, his expression will change a lot. He began speaking in a strange, muffled tone and appeared increasingly unsettling. This behavior made Denise even more suspicious of him. Unfortunately, Denise were unable to resolve the case and failed to get a confession from Michael. He denied any involvement in Samantha's disappearance, claiming he had only seen her a few times and did not remember her. This was clearly a lie. To assist the police, Michael's younger brother, Tim, agreed to help him confess. Tim underwent intensive training and consulted psychologists to find the most effective method to help Michael tell the truth. Michael was already under significant stress, and as he broke down, he confessed to accidentally killing Samantha in 1986. He described to the detectives what happened the day little girl disappeared. He claimed that he had known Samantha for some time and had earned her trust, which led her to agree to go with him that day. Michael drove her to a remote area in the wilderness. There, he offered her a bottle of CoCA laced with sleeping pills. After she drank it, she lost consciousness. When he began to assault her, she suddenly woke up and started screaming. To silence her, he gave her more sleeping pills, and she passed out again. Afterward, he briefly stepped out of the car for a walk. When he returned, he found that little girl was unresponsive. However, he maintained throughout the interrogation that it was an accident. He claimed he only intended to assault her and never meant to kill her, insisting that he had never killed anyone before. Michael accepts responsibility for his actions towards Samantha, but he did not apologize to her family or leave the courtroom. In 2002, he confessed during the trial to the unintentional murder of Samantha Knight and was sentenced to 17 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. Samantha's family were outraged by what they considered a lenient sentence, but this was the maximum penalty for manslaughter at the time. The prosecutor called Samantha's best friend as a witness. This girl, who appeared in photographs and was believed to have also been affected by Michael's actions, had previously refused to speak to law enforcement, citing fears of revealing information. Her silence had serious consequences for many children, including the tragic loss of Samantha. She attended court with her mother, who supported her, but their identities were kept confidential. Samantha's best friend mentioned that she often felt lonely when her mother was at work, so she will go for a walk. During those times, she met Michael, who gave her the attention she craved. Friend claimed that Samantha's mother sometimes left she with Michael and even spent the night with him, during which he molested she. However, Samantha's mother firmly denied knowing Michael and insisted that she never left him alone with Samantha. Strangely, the witnesses later retracted their statements about Samantha without providing any reasons. Finding her remains for burial became extremely important. Initially, Michael claimed he couldn't remember where Samantha's body was. However, several years into his prison sentence, he suddenly recalled that he had buried her in Cooper Park, just a 15-minute drive from her home. Yet, he later changed his story again, saying the body was buried a bit farther away than he originally indicated. On the map, he pointed to an area where a yacht club now stands, which was built just a year and a half after Samantha's disappearance. Despite extensive searches in the area using trained dogs, Samantha's remains have never been located. To this day, her body has not been found, and many doubt it will ever be found. In addition, Michael is also suspected in the disappearance of 5-year-old Renee Aitken, who vanished without a trace in South Wales in February 1984. When there was a thunderstorm, her brother went to check on her and noticed she was missing. He found her bed empty and the front door open. He told their parents, who then called the police. They began searching for her immediately. However, there was a storm at the time, so it's possible that all the evidence was washed away. Initially, the main suspect was Brian James Fitzpatrick. A man with a history of child kidnapping, he lived nearby and knew Renee's family. However, he died in a car accident just weeks before his trial. For many years, the case went cold, but in 2013, police revisited the investigation and looked into Michael. At the time of Renee's disappearance, he worked as a gardener close to their home. A family member recognized that he bore a resemblance to a suspicious man who had been seen behind their house. In Michael's scrapbook dedicated to missing children, there were articles and photos of Renee. Researcher Denise Hoffman believed that Renee's case shared similarities with the disappearance of another girl, Samantha, as both were small and light. Michael could have used drugs to incapacitate Renee's and sneak her out of the house. Michael was skilled at gaining the trust of children, causing suspicions that he was involved in Renee's kidnapping. Detectives questioned him about the incident, but he denied any involvement. They believed him, even though he had previously denied involvement in Samantha's case, which he later admitted. However, the police concluded there was not enough evidence to charge Michael with kidnapping, and Renee's case remains unsolved. She has not been found. Both the police and Renee's family believe she has likely been dead for a long time. While in prison, Michael developed an interest in Aboriginal culture and history, studying various materials on the subject. He authored several works, which were sent to libraries across Australia. In total, he wrote 16 pieces, ranging from 6 to 28 pages long. He also pursued studies in archaeology and earned a degree in that field. Michael was remarkably intelligent, impressing everyone with his capabilities. He has the potential to become a scientist and can contribute to research projects. However, he chose a path of crime. In 2014, Michael became eligible for parole after serving the minimum term of his imprisonment. This made the public extremely indignant, as many people believed he should remain in prison. Individuals like him will never change and will continue to pose a threat to society. Due to public backlash, Michael's request for parole was not granted and he remains in detention. The public, including Samantha's mother, wants Michael to spend the rest of his life in prison. She continued to suffer from the pain of losing her daughter. She could not give her daughter a proper burial and had never seen any sign of remorse from Michael. Supporters of Michael sought to challenge his sentence. They pointed to his participation in 55 therapy programs in prison, claiming he had undergone rehabilitation and was a model prisoner, he deserving of freedom. He behaved well and did not violate prison rules, leading to his release on September 5, 2019, at the age of 68. As part of the bail conditions, Michael was required to stay under strict supervision for an additional 5 years in a special facility for former prisoners. Police fitted him with a tracking bracelet, and he was given a lengthy list of 56 restrictions. These included bans on visiting public places, playgrounds, and schools, a prohibition on contacting minors, restrictions on leaving the country, a ban on changing his name or appearance. He was also subject to regular checks for drug and alcohol use. Despite these measures, there was no guarantee that Michael, the serial rapist, would refrain from committing further crimes. Even his younger brother, Tim, believed releasing him was a mistake. The public was outraged by his release, they fearing that he was already planning new crimes against children. When Michael was released, he had a large tumor in his groin, which he had refused to treat while in prison due to a lack of trust in the medical staff. After his release, he focused on his health, successfully treating the tumor and managing his heart disease. However, he declined medication to reduce his libido because he believed they would interfere with his other medications. Initially, Michael stayed in a shelter near Long Bay, but when the public discovered his location and began to pursue him, he was moved to a secret location. The public was outraged that once his supervision period ended, he would be completely free, able to change his name and appearance, get married, have children, and travel, opportunities that Samantha would never have. This led many to believe that his sentence was unfair. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Rickman. At 2:30 a.m. on Friday, September 13, 2013, Victoria Rickman, 30, called 911 from her home on Cliffland Road in DeKalb County, Georgia. She reported a violent incident involving her fiancé, William Carter. She told the operator that he had tried to rape her again, and despite her pleas for him to stop, he didn't, so she shot him multiple times. When the police arrived, they found Victoria at the door, holding a small dog. Inside the bedroom was a scene of chaos and violence. The lifeless, naked body of a man was on the bed, riddled with bullets, and blood was splattered throughout the room, with bullet holes marking the walls and ceiling. A .40 caliber pistol was found on the nightstand. The victim, 30 years old William Carter, was declared dead at the scene. Victoria, in a state of hysteria, required medical assistance. After examining the scene, the police initially concluded that it was a case of self-defense, as Victoria claimed William had attacked her, forcing her to shoot randomly in defense. She was taken to the police station to provide a statement. However, as the investigation progressed, new details came to light. Victoria Rickman's first marriage ended in a divorce, with both parties accusing each other of abuse. During the marriage, she had a son whom she adored. At the time of the divorce, he was 8 years old. Victoria's friends described her as a devoted mother and a kind person who was always willing to help others. A few years after the divorce, Victoria met William Carter through work colleagues. William was a successful businessman and is a divorced man. At that time, Victoria worked as a marketing consultant. They often encountered each other at work and soon began a passionate romance. They were inseparable, doing everything together and appearing to be the perfect couple. However, over time, the relationship developed issues similar to those Victoria had experienced in her first marriage. After they got engaged and moved in together, Victoria discovered that things were not as perfect as she had hoped. William became possessive, insulted her, and was physically abusive. She repeatedly forgave him and they continued living together. It was a vicious cycle of a toxic relationship that she couldn't escape. Victoria's friends advised her to leave William, they warning that things would end badly if she stayed. Victoria said she endured psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, and she felt she had no ability to change her situation. She continued to endure and forgive his behavior. However, just before the tragedy, she found the strength to leave Then he began to harass her relentlessly. According to Victoria, that night, he broke into her house and attacked her, escalating their conflicts to a peak. He threatened to rape her, and although she resisted, but she couldn't overpower him due to his physical strength. For the first time, Victoria feared for her life, convinced that the night would end in death. Either hers or his. So, she defended herself by grabbing a gun and shooting him multiple times. Victoria's best friend fully supported her and was sure that she was in grave danger that night, otherwise, she would not have used a weapon. The friend knew there were family issues but did not think it could all end like this. The detectives decided to speak with William's family to hear their version and get a more complete picture of the relationship between Victoria and William. William's parents, who had just learned of what happened to their son, immediately denied that it was self-defense. They gave a completely different story about Victoria. The parents said they had warned their son about the dangers of such a toxic relationship. They disliked Victoria from the start because of her unpleasant personality, and they saw her as a threat to be avoided. A few weeks before the tragedy, another disturbing incident occurred during an argument between William and Victoria. His parents noticed he was bleeding and injured. He explained that Victoria had hit him on the head with a hammer and bit his back. His parents were shocked because the blow was severe and could have been fatal. They dreaded to think what might have happened if she had had a gun. Then William and Victoria separated again, and his parents hope they won't come back. He didn't press charges against she because she threatened to accuse him of rape. William's family said they often argued and these conflicts often progressed into fights. Sometimes Victoria attacked William, and sometimes he attacked her. During their 3 years their relationship was tumultuous. Victoria and William frequently reported each other to the police for issues ranging from domestic disputes to assaults. Police reports confirmed this pattern. She threatened to obtain a restraining order against he, while he threatened to have her jailed for making false accusations. A few days before William died, he and Victoria met, but the meeting did not end well. They argued, and William called 911 to request police assistance to evict Victoria from his home. When the police arrived, Victoria claimed that William had hit her, but they saw that she had no injuries. The police discovered that she had sent text messages to his phone with false accusations, claiming he had kidnapped her and threatened her, whereas he was simply asking her to leave him alone. The police helped she pack her belongings and escorted her out of his house. William told her he never wanted to see her again. Although Victoria promised not to bother him anymore, she did not keep her word. A few days later, Victoria began texting William, asking to meet, but he ignored her. She then devised a new plan and contacted his ex-wife, repeatedly harassing his ex-wife. The ex-wife complained to William about her behavior. This upset he, and he sent she a message. He said she are too dangerous to be around, and told her never to contact him or his ex-wife again. The conflict reignited. During another argument, he threatened to report her to the police because she attacked him with a hammer. Victoria was furious because she realized that this could threaten her custody of her beloved son. William's family believed this was the motive for the crime. The relationship between William and Victoria became increasingly complicated and confusing. Although Victoria alleged that she was raped by William, an autopsy found no signs of violence or internal trauma, shows that sexual intercourse was consensual. On her body, there were only 2 small bruises, one on her arm and one on her leg. These bruises appeared old and not the result of a recent struggle, as they were already fading. Her new manicure was intact without any broken nails and showed no signs of a struggle since there were no skin particles under her nails. Furthermore, William did not have any scratches, which was unusual. When the police arrived at the house, Victoria's appearance raised suspicions. While the room was covered in blood, she appeared clean. With no blood on her pajamas or body, and her hair was wet as if she had just showered. The police doubted Victoria's story and suspected her of killing William. Forensic experts thoroughly investigated the scene of the tragedy and concluded that Victoria's testimony was inaccurate. Evidence indicated that William was shot while standing with his back to Victoria. It was believed he was next to the bed, facing the window, when he was hit 3 times. One of the shots caused blood to fill his lungs, leading to a cough. The high blood spatter on the wall next to the window suggested that he was standing when shot. After coughing, he likely fell onto the bed, and Victoria continued shooting him, she firing several more shots into his chest and head. There were no signs of a struggle in the house, everything was neatly in place. This also contradicts Victoria's testimony that a struggle occurred. Victoria was detained and brought to the police station for questioning. Upon hearing she was accused of murdering William, her expression changed drastically, surprised by the accusation. When the police tried to collect her phone as evidence for examination, she tried to snatch it back furiously. This behavior seemed strange to the investigators. It seemed that she was hiding something on the phone and feared it would be discovered. Investigators examined the correspondence between Victoria and William, as well as their phones, revealing that William deeply loved her. He sent heartfelt messages, calling her the love of his life, but expressed concern about her actions. He feared her false accusations might lead to his imprisonment. Subsequent messages from William show a marked change in tone. The investigation uncovered that Victoria had sent herself a threatening message from William's phone to incriminate him. Further evidence showed that Victoria had attacked William on at least 2 occasions, yet she called the police and claimed he attacked her. Victoria threatened to smear her neighbor Plunkett when he tried to evict her from the flat. Victoria Rickman was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She finally stood trial for the murder of William Carter in August 2017, after spending almost 4 years in jail. Once a vibrant and attractive woman, famous for her beautiful appearance, Victoria appeared completely different and almost unrecognizable in court. Several men testified about how skillfully she had manipulated them during flirtations, causing them to become infatuated with her and willing to do anything for her. Even some police officers admitted they were captivated by Victoria's beauty and flirtatious behavior when she responded to complaints of domestic violence, make them side with her. These officers later regretted their lack of impartiality. A prime example of Victoria's manipulation was her relationship with Deputy Sheriff Colby County Price. She reported threats from William to him. Upon seeing bruises on her body, he entrusted her with one of his personal pistols for self-defense. This same pistol was used in the shooting of William. Additionally, the deputy sheriff took Victoria to a shooting range and taught her how to use a gun, and she developed her shooting skills expertly. After William was murdered, Victoria first called Cuba Price and then, on his advice, she called 911. During the trial, Cuba Price admitted he was captivated by Victoria, despite being married at the time. He thought their relationship might evolve, but denied having an affair, stating they were just friends. By the trial, he no longer worked at the sheriff's office and was instead an instructor at the Air Force Base. He had been fired 5 days after William's death for not cooperating with the investigation, as he protected and defended Victoria. The charges alleged that Victoria used her charm to entice William to her home on that tragic night. Sadly, William could no longer share his side of the story, so the prosecutor presented it on his behalf. According to the prosecutor, Victoria called William that evening, inviting him over with the promise of intimacy, thereby luring him into a trap. Once he arrived, she allegedly took advantage of the situation and killed him in cold blood by shooting him 9 times. The prosecutor argued that shooting him 9 times was excessive. Her decisive actions suggested premeditation, leading the prosecutor to conclude that it was a planned murder. Additional evidence supported this conclusion. At the time of the murder, Victoria was living with another man, Andrew, in his house. That night, she asked Andrew to stay at his mother's house so she could be alone and get a good night's sleep. Trusting her, Andrew agreed and went to his mother's. Just half an hour after he left, Victoria contacted William, and he arrived at her house after midnight. It's unclear what she said to him on the phone, but it's presumed she invited him over. There were no signs of forced entry. Victoria herself opened the door for William. He did not break into her home and was unaware of her address until she gave it to him during the call. During the trial, the doctor who examined Victoria after the murder testified, and photos of Victoria were presented. The doctor stated that he found no injuries on her body, including any defensive wounds or fresh bruises. It appeared she had not been raped, as their relationship was consensual. Notably, a bruise on her hand, which she claimed was from a fight with he, was visible in a selfie taken the day before his murder, proving it was unrelated to self-defense. Photographs from the crime scene were also shown at the trial. William's naked body, with multiple gunshot wounds, was found lying face-up on the bed. His clothes were on the floor next to the bed, his watch was neatly placed on the nightstand, and he held a gold chain in his left hand. It seemed he was disturbed while dressing, and when he tried to refasten his necklace, he was shot. An expert confirmed that William was shot from behind, indicating he posed no threat to Victoria. An autopsy revealed that William was shot 9 times. 4 times in the chest, 3 in the back, and twice in the head. He also had bruises on his chin and left hand, likely caused by a blunt object. Blood spatters were found on the wall, curtains, and pillows on the floor. The medical examiner suggested that William was facing the window when he was first shot in the back, fell onto the bed, and was then shot the remaining times. During the trial, questions were raised about the reloading of the pistol. The pistol can only hold 12 rounds, yet 9 spent cartridges were found at the scene, leaving 4 bullets in the pistol. This totals 13 bullets, leading the prosecution to conclude that Victoria had reloaded the pistol. If she reloaded, the act could not be deemed as self-defense, as reloading shows premeditation. At the trial, a neighbor named Plankett testified that Victoria had previously threatened him when he attempted to evict her from her apartment. She threatened to accuse him of rape, causing him to back down to avoid trouble. Victoria had filed multiple rape complaints against different men, but no criminal cases were initiated because there was no evidence beyond her claims. The prosecution found it suspicious that all the men around her were accused of rape. The lawyer argued that Victoria was a vulnerable and defenseless woman in life. She had suffered violence from both her first husband and William, her fiancé. On the night of the incident, William broke into her house, assaulted, and raped her, then threatened her life. To protect herself, she used a firearm provided by her friend, the deputy sheriff. The lawyer asserted that this was clearly a case of self-defense. The defense stated that William arrived at Victoria's house intoxicated and under medication. A doctor testified that 3 days before his death, William reported experiencing delirium and was prescribed antipsychotics to aid his sleep. The lawyer also suggested he might have used illegal drugs that night, causing his aggression. However, it remains unknown whether he was intoxicated or on drugs that night, as no toxicology test was conducted. Dr. Chris Lees Perry, the former Georgia chief medical examiner, testified for the defense, indicating that Victoria first shot William in the chest, not the back. During the trial, Victoria's 911 call was played, and the lawyer stressed that the emotions she expressed were genuine and couldn't be faked. She sounded truly desperate. Victoria's best friend testified for the defense, stating that she had seen bruises on Victoria before, which Victoria claimed were caused by William. However, the friend never witnessed any violent incidents and couldn't confirm the bruises were from William. She did recall overhearing William yelling at Victoria on the phone once. Seeing Victoria's distress during that call convinced her that Victoria was a victim of domestic violence and not capable of murder. She believed Victoria acted in self-defense. The defense also highlighted William's troubled past. He had struggled with substance abuse and had been arrested several times for property damage. After 10 years of marijuana use, he went to rehab. William's parents confirmed this thing, but they said that he had overcome his addiction, rebuilt his life, and started a business. They were proud of his recovery and believed that Victoria was his last obsession. They felt that whenever she called, he would rush to her without realizing the potential danger. The prosecution presented a dramatic video recorded on Victoria's mobile phone 4 months before William's death. In the video, she threatened to call the police and accused him of rape after he kicked her out. She acted aggressively, trying to enter the house, but he prevented her. She responded that he could not tell her what to do and that she had a gun and knew how to use it. Her behavior did not seem like that of a typical victim of violence. The conversation concluded as William expressing that Victoria was frightening him, saying he did not want to see her anymore, and then leaving. The prosecution believed something similar occurred on the night of the incident, but with a tragic ending. At the trial, the jury heard 2 different yet plausible stories. They now had to decide which side was more convincing, its self-defense or premeditated murder. The jury reached a verdict in less than an hour, finding Victoria Rickman guilty. She sat silently, devastated by the decision, and cried. She addressed the judge, saying that she believed the jury was wrong. "Thank you for explaining the facts of this case. I am a mother whose son was taken from me." She describes herself as a battered woman who endured years of abuse and suffered nightmares and post-traumatic stress disorder from trying to defend herself. Victoria continued to deny her guilt and showed no remorse for shooting William. As a result, the judge was not lenient and sentenced Victoria to life in prison without parole. Her lawyer was also shocked by the verdict and sentence, considering them unfair. He believed the evidence was circumstantial and unconvincing, and that she deserved the possibility of parole and a more lenient sentence. Victoria is appealing and hopes her case will be reviewed, but so far her requests have been denied. William's daughter is being raised by his mother, and Victoria's son is being raised by her ex-husband. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila Vaughn Wees. Sheila Vaughn Wees was born into a loving and respectful family. However, as she grew older, she struggled to instill these values in her daughter, who became stubborn and disobedient, eventually leading to tragedy. On June 10, 1952, Neil Wees and Liz Lenore Allen welcomed their daughter, Sheila. Neil was a World War I veteran who had served in the United States Air Force, and Liz worked as an accountant. The couple had 3 children, Sheila, Bill, and Deborah, and they lived in Minneapolis. Sheila did very well in school and was an excellent student. She then went to Boston University, graduating with a master's degree in political science. After graduation, she worked at a publishing house, where she interacted with several famous people. One day, Sheila met James Mack, a well-known conductor, composer, producer, and arranger in the music industry. At that time, James had children from a previous marriage. But this did not stop him from starting a romantic relationship with Sheila. Their relationship quickly advanced, and they soon got married. After the wedding, the couple moved to a small town in the district of Foreign. There, they got involved in community activities and even organized performances in their backyard. In October 1995, her daughter Lois Heather Mack was born. At 43, Sheila was overjoyed to welcome a healthy baby girl. She and her husband, James, showered Lois with love and enrolled her in a top preschool and school. However, some relatives felt that Sheila spoiled her daughter. In 2001, Sheila and James planned a vacation and bought tickets for a Mediterranean cruise, they taking Lois along. Sadly, during the trip, James suffered a serious leg injury that was not properly treated, resulting in partial paralysis. The family later filed a lawsuit against the cruise company for damages, but the legal process took more than 9 years to resolve. On July 20, 2006, the family went on a trip to Athens, where James later died in their hotel room. His death was recorded on August 6, 2006. After his death, James Maxwell was revealed, stating that his daughter Lois, Heather, would inherit $1.5 million. The relationship between Sheila and Lois was strained. Lois often displayed disruptive behavior, throwing tantrums, and even attacking her mother. Since 2008, police reports have documented 35 incidents of domestic violence in Sheila's household. Additionally, Lois often ran away from home, prompting Sheila to file a missing persons report. Friends of Sheila's have reported that she sought help from various psychologists to deal with the situation. During this challenging period, Lois was a middle school student at Oak Park and River Forest School, where her talent for dancing started to show. She generally behaved well in school, but discussions about her relationship with her mother would often lead to her becoming upset. At that time, she was dating a boy named Tommy Schaefer, who was 2 years older than her. Tommy had a history of legal issues due to minor offenses. Tommy had many friends. He was especially close to his cousin Robert Bibbs. In 2011, Sheila's family's lawsuit after James injured his leg on a cruise was settled, resulting in a court judgment awarding her family $340,000 in damages. Since James had died, the money was supposed to go to Lois as stated in his will. However, for reasons that are unclear, the judge ordered the money to be sent to Sheila, which increased the conflict between Lois and Sheila. Her resentment towards her mother grew, and she made numerous threats against Sheila. By 2013, Sheila, concerned for her safety, hired a private investigator because Lois had begun to stalk her, closely monitoring her routes, schedules, and daily routines. There was animosity between them, which made their trip to the Greek coast seem unusual. However, nothing catastrophic happened during that time. In 2014, Tommy and Lois began seeing each other more frequently. Despite Sheila's objections, the situation escalated when Lois stole Sheila's bank card at a hotel party and spent over $1,000. Her mother threatened to report Lois to the police, blaming her for many problems, including the death of her father James. Tensions rose, leading Lois and Tommy to consider a drastic solution to their problems, as Sheila was seen as an obstacle to accessing the family's finances. Despite their strained relationship, Sheila and Lois traveled to Bali together in August 2014. The mother hopes that during her 10 days here, her daughter will reconsider her feelings and stop resenting her. They stayed at the St. Regis Hotel in Bali. On the day they arrived in Bali, Lois texted Tommy, confirming that everything was going according to plan. She then stole her mother's credit card again and bought a $12,000 ticket for Tommy. He arrived on the island just 12 hours later. Meanwhile, Lois was arguing with her mother at the hotel, this time about the news of her pregnancy. Tommy then went to the hotel where Sheila and Lois were staying and got involved in the fight. He hit Sheila in the face with a metal crowbar, killing her instantly. Tommy told his cousin Robert what had happened. Lois and Tommy then put Sheila's body in a suitcase and asked a porter to leave it in the hotel lobby while they called a taxi. The taxi arrived within 10 minutes and they quickly loaded the suitcase containing Sheila's body into the trunk to leave Bali as soon as possible. However, Sheila had previously warned the hotel staff not to accept any payments made with her card without her presence, knowing that Lois often stole her cards. As a result, Lois had no money and the couple were unable to pay for their hotel room. They fled without paying the bill, leaving their passports in the hotel safe. Without these documents, they cannot go to the airport. Lois and Tommy asked the taxi driver to stop at a budget hotel called Rita Valley, which they had just passed. They left their suitcases in the taxi and asked the driver to wait 10 to 15 minutes while they checked in. However, 2 hours had passed, and the driver became impatient and went into the hotel himself, but found their room empty. Lois and Tommy had checked in there but had quickly fled. Frustrated, the taxi driver returned to his car and noticed that the suitcase was leaking a red liquid. Suspecting foul play, he called the police. When the police arrived and opened the suitcase, they discovered Sheila's body inside. Forensic experts later concluded that she had died from facial fractures that had blocked her airway. In addition, her fingers were broken and her body was covered in bruises. The heartbreaking news of Sheila's death reached her family, prompting her sister, Deborah, to begin searching online for information about the case. All she found was a photograph of a suitcase. As details of the murder were reported in the media, public interest grew. Staff at the Rita Suitcase Hotel informed police that a young couple had checked in that night without luggage. When hotel staff asked them to provide their full names for internet use, they complied, knowing that this was required. The police were quick to obtain the couple's information. Police began to go to the room the couple was staying in. Hotel staff said the room had been searched and was empty. However, the couple had secretly returned to the room because they had nowhere else to go and were exhausted. They were sleeping when police found them. Lois and Tommy were taken to the police station for questioning. They gave conflicting stories about being attacked by a gang at the St. Regis Hotel and claimed that the robbers had killed Sheila. While the couple's testimony was inconsistent, the hotel staff and taxi driver remained consistent in their tests. As a result, Lois and Tommy were arrested for murder. Lois became angry, shouting that she was innocent and demanding a lawyer from the United States. The couple appeared on public television in Indonesia, with the report filmed from the police station. Tommy covered his face with a t-shirt, while Lois smiled and smoked a cigarette. They were then transferred to Lesenpar Prison, which houses serious criminals and murderers. Sheila's body was returned home for burial. Her case attracted international attention. During the proceedings, Lois underwent several psychological evaluations, but the results were not considered in the verdict. As the investigation progressed, police discovered more details about the case and the media reported that Lois was pregnant. Then on March 17, 2015, a baby girl named Stella was born. The police allowed Lois to see her baby, but only within the confines of the prison. The baby was healthy, but had an extra finger on his left hand that required surgery to remove. At the hearing, Tommy cried as he claimed that he was defending himself against an aggressive Sheila. He said that she attacked him when she found out about Lois's pregnancy. He also said that Lois often expressed a desire to escape her difficult mother. Lois' testimony contradicted Tommy's. She said she never wanted her mother to die. During the violent fight, she even ran into the bathroom to save her mother. But her testimony was not believed. The judge was presented with evidence that showed Lois and Tommy's criminal intent. Lois had previously suggested that Tommy hire a hitman to kill Sheila and had prepared $40,000 for the purpose. Sheila's autopsy showed obvious injuries and bruises on her hands and face, indicating that Sheila had fought back in self-defense. As a result, Lois Heather Mack and Tommy Schaefer were convicted of premeditated murder. Under Indonesian law, they faced the death penalty. However, the court pardoned them. This leniency was largely due to their newborn child and the couple's deep remorse. Tommy realized the severity of his actions. Sheila's family later visited him in prison, talked to him, and expressed their grief. This interaction caused Tommy to fall into a depression. He began to hate himself and truly regret his choices. His mental state deteriorated, leading to health problems, causing him to lose 11 kilograms and look pale. In April 2015, the final court hearing concluded, and the judge announced the verdict. Lois Heather Mack was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Tommy Schaefer received an 18-year term. The prosecution described them as ruthless criminals. However, Tommy's good behavior and expressed remorse helped him avoid a longer sentence. As they left the courtroom, Lois posed for photographers from various newspapers and, while drinking a soda that smelled of alcohol, smiled and made jokes. The only thing that troubled her was the fact that she would be released much earlier than Tommy. Meanwhile, Tommy looked at her with anger and wanted nothing to do with her, marking the end of their relationship. Lois, who avoided the death penalty and received a shorter sentence, acted provocatively in prison. She frequently took photos and videos with her friends in prison, enjoying their time together. She managed to get alcohol to drink. To earn money to buy alcohol, she sold food in the prison yard. The prison authorities allowed her to sell food, feeling sorry for her because she was a single mother, but they saw that she did not care much for her daughter, who spent her early years in terrible conditions. Tommy considered Lois a fallen person and mentally ill. One day, reporters secretly entered the prison and recorded footage of Lois having fun and dancing with friends in her cell. The footage quickly went viral on television and online, causing considerable public outrage. In response, Tommy filed a petition with the United States government, requesting that Lois be transferred from the Indonesian prison to a psychiatric hospital in the United States. In the petition, he expressed that he was not seeking sympathy but hoped that their daughter would grow up to be a good person. A year later, Tommy wrote a letter to his friends detailing how Sheila's murder was planned and carried out, and Lois's questionable actions in front of their young daughter Stella. Lois seemed to be focused only on her own gain, with no regard for Stella. The responsibility of looking after Lois' daughter Stella was eventually given to a fellow prisoner, Ashar Putra Melody Sert, who had been released. Ashar quickly adapted to life in Indonesia and married a wealthy local man. Stella was then placed in the care of the couple. The police identified Robert's involvement in Sheila's murder, leading to his quick arrest and trial in 2017. He pleaded guilty to breaking the law and being an accessory to Sheila's murder. During the trial, he revealed that in August 2014, Tommy had come to him for advice on how to carry out a murder. As a result, Robert received a 9-year prison sentence. Sheila's family was pleased with the outcome. While in prison, Lois ended her relationship with Tommy. In October 2021, Lois completed 7 years in an Indonesian prison and was paroled. Her reunion with her 6-year-old daughter, Stella, was a moment of liberation for her. Stella lived in Indonesia for another month before being extradited to the United States with her mother. At that point, her daughter no longer needed a guardian. Upon arriving in Chicago, Lois was arrested at the airport by FBI agents. She faced new charges of conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad and obstruction of justice. Lois attempted to draw media attention to her arrest, believing it was unfair, especially since she had already served time in Indonesia. She felt it was unfair that the police had brought new charges against her. At her first court appearance in the United States, Lois denied all charges against her. Her attorney, Keith Vogel-Barova, argued for her to be released on bail. In response, District Judge Charnel agreed to consider the appeal and heard from Assistant District Attorney Terry Keeney. The court needed a reasonable amount of time to make a decision. A week later, Lois reached a plea deal with police and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad. A hearing then took place in Illinois Federal Court. District Judge Matthew Kelly considered the prosecution's recommendation for a 28-year prison sentence, minus 7 years for time served in Indonesia. The judge then sentenced Lois Heather Mack to 26 years in prison, ordered her to pay $2,278 in restitution, and fined her $50,000. Hello again. True crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sandra Chesky. On November 17, 1973, in Geechee, Manito, a small nature reserve in Iowa. On that day, 5 teenagers from South Dakota embarked on a trip there, planning to enjoy their Saturday together, unaware that only one of them would return alive. Sandra Chesky, born in 1960, was the youngest of 5 children. Her parents lost a son shortly after birth due to health problems. Her parents faced serious financial difficulties, which led to conflict. Eventually, the father left. Leaving the mother to care for 3 sons and a daughter alone, she had to work hard to support her young children. While her mother completed her nursing studies, the children stayed with their grandparents. By the time Sandra was 18 months old, they had all lived together for 3.5 years. Life on the farm with her grandparents was difficult. Mainly due to their age, it was difficult for them to manage 4 grandchildren. So the children were often left to fend for themselves. However, the grandparents were very involved with their grandchildren, and the children grew up in a loving environment. After finishing school, the children were reunited with their mother by the time Sandra started school. Her mother had started a new relationship and invited her partner to live with her. This led to conflict in the family as the children struggled to accept their stepfather, creating a tense atmosphere. The mother wanted to build her own life, but her children felt like a hindrance. Finally, she made a difficult decision. One day, when Sandra returned home from school, she learned that she and her brother Bill were going to be placed in different foster homes. This news shocked Sandra, because she had not caused any problems and had tried to maintain good relationships with everyone in the family. Sandra felt that her mother was choosing her new partner over her children, which felt like another betrayal to her. The foster family she was placed with was dysfunctional. One day, Sandra told a social worker that her foster parents were abusive. Unfortunately, she was moved to another foster family that was also cold and uncaring. She did small chores around the house and felt like a servant. Eventually, she convinced her mother to let her return home. During this time, her brother, Bill, also returned home. He had previously lived with a police officer's family, where he learned strict discipline. The 2 brothers tried to behave and obey their parents, fearing that they would be sent back to foster care. However, after a while, Bill lost his temper, prompting his stepfather to send both him and Sandra to a strict boarding school in South Dakota. The rules there were harsh. When they returned home for the holidays, they begged their parents not to send them back and were filled with fear. In the summer of 1973, Sandra's family moved to a large farm outside of Sioux Falls. At the time, Sandra was just 13 years old. At a party with friends, Sandra met a boy named Roger Essam. Roger was a friend of one of Sandra's acquaintances, and after they met, they began talking and communicating regularly. Eventually, Roger asked her out on a date, and their relationship developed over time. Roger, 17, and Sandra, 13, are in a relationship. But Sandra looks older than her actual age, which is why Roger doesn't suspect her of being too young. However, Sandra is afraid of losing him and keeps her real age a secret. One day, while hanging out with Roger, Sandra meets his friend Stuart. Later, they also have another friend, Michael. The group, all of them come from respectable families and have no history of trouble with the law. Planning for the camping trip began when Roger and Michael met at school on November 16, 1973. They came up with the idea of visiting the Gitche-Manitou State Reservation in Lyon County, Iowa, where they could camp, have a campfire, and share stories. Since Stuart, the oldest of the group, had a driver's license and was allowed to drive his parents' car, they quickly agreed to go. By evening, the group knew about the plan and were looking forward to their weekend adventure. On November 17, 1973, Stuart said goodbye to her parents and set off with her younger sister Dana to meet up with the rest of their group. Meanwhile, Roger invited Sandra to join them on the trip, which she agreed to. Her brother Bill had originally planned to come along, but he canceled at the last minute. The group of 5 teenagers arrived at the park around 9 p.m. Although they were running a bit behind schedule due to the time spent gathering supplies for their hike, the conservation area was home to vast forests inhabited by deer, as well as a large river that offered numerous convenient camping spots. After exploring the area, they selected a suitable location to set up camp as night began to fall. The teenagers lit a fire, sat around it, and sang songs together. Sandra sat next to her boyfriend, hugging him. The group was having a wonderful time, completely oblivious to the deadly dangers that the night could bring. On November 18, 1973, a young couple visited the reserve, intending to take a relaxing walk and enjoy the scenery. However, during their walk, they stumbled upon something suspicious in the distance. As the man approached, he saw two lifeless bodies lying in the tall grass. He immediately reported the discovery to a park ranger and the police. About an hour later, police arrived, and after investigating, they discovered the bodies of two teenagers who had been killed by gunfire. The victims had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to their bodies, including their backs, heads, and chests. Police determined that the victims were killed at close range, giving them little chance of survival. The severity and proximity of the wounds led police to conclude that the attack was brutal and intentional. A fire was discovered at a nearby campsite, likely started by a group of teenagers. However, upon further investigation, two more bodies were found, both victims killed by gunshots. Police quickly called in forensic experts to examine the crime scene and collect evidence. The bodies were sent to the lab for autopsies, where the victims were quickly identified. All of the victims were from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and included 15-year-old Michael Hadrath, 17-year-old Roger Essam, 18-year-old Stuart Bod, and 14-year-old Dana Bade. Stuart's sister. The news of this tragic event has left the relatives and friends of the victims in a state of shock. They were known for their calm and kind nature, focused on sports, and stayed away from any criminal activity or negative lifestyle. It seemed like they were just gathering to relax. But, unfortunately, their evening turned tragic due to the evil intentions of others. The relatives and friends of the victims cannot understand who could have committed such a heinous act or why, as the victims had no enemies or anyone who would wish them harm. Stuart's parents told police that the teens had gone to the campsite in a blue van, but the van was not found at the scene. The van's disappearance was a key clue. Forensic experts believed it could be a crucial lead in solving the case. During the autopsy, forensic experts discovered that the victims were killed with various caliber weapons, including 12, 16, and 20 caliber bullets. This led police to suspect that at least 3 people may have been involved in the massacre. The investigation had difficulty gathering valuable information about the perpetrators. The lack of evidence, including the murder weapon, the victim's car, and witness statements, hampered the case's progress. It is important to note that in the 1970s, the police did not have modern methods and technology. This may have contributed to the case's delay. However, when a police officer from the Sioux Falls station contacted the police handling the case, the police reported that a 13-year-old girl, Sandra Chesky, came to the station and shared a shocking story. According to Sandra, after arriving at the reserve, her group of friends began setting up camp. As soon as they finished, a group of people emerged from the woods. They proceeded to attack Sandra's friends with guns. Sandra chose not to resist and was taken away from the campsite by the group. Sandra was then taken out of town, where she was raped, but was eventually released. She then tried to find her friends, but was unable to find them. The next morning, Sandra tried to contact her boyfriend, Roger, but her calls went unanswered. This left Sandra worried and panicked. It was not until she arrived at the police station that she received the heartbreaking news. Police have taken Sandra's statement. They want to find out what happened on the night of the massacre, specifically what she witnessed and who was involved. Police are trying to understand the motive behind the murder of the 4 young men and why the killers spared Sandra's life. Sandra explained that she and her friends had planned to camp at the reserve the day before. However, the group was delayed, and when they arrived, A series of events took place that led to this tragic incident. The group arrived at the reserve at around 22:30. Armed with a guitar and a small musical instrument set, they planned to stay there for the night and then return home. According to the Sandra, they set up camp, lit a fire, and rested around it. The teenagers planned to smoke marijuana and then go to sleep, however. Their relaxation did not last long. An hour later, they began to hear footsteps. The fire limited their vision, making it difficult for them to see what was going on around them. Then they heard a stranger yell. Roger said he was going to check. As he stood up and walked away from the campfire, a loud gunshot rang out. Roger collapsed to the ground. The group of young men immediately panicked. A second shot rang out, causing Stewart to fall to the ground next to his friend. Then came several more shots. Sandra then witnessed 3 men appear, all armed with handguns. The rest of Sandra's group quickly took cover behind trees and bushes. However, they were soon apprehended by the men, strangers who claimed to be police officers working to combat organized crime and illegal substances. The men implied that they had seen the teenagers smoking marijuana. Although they claimed to be law enforcement officers, they were not wearing police uniforms and did not display badges or identification. Sandra was very scared and complied with the criminals' demands. She did not dare to resist because she was afraid of the consequences of disobeying. On the contrary, Michael did not comply with the criminals' demands, so the men pointed their pistols at him. Michael instinctively raised his hands, but the attackers fired, seriously injuring Michael. Meanwhile, Roger and Stewart were still lying on the ground. The attackers then asked Sandra about a blue truck. Then the attackers led Michael, Donna, and Sandra toward the parking lot. After arriving at Stewart's blue van, an attacker asked Sandra to unlock the car, which she did. The attacker then got into the driver's seat and they drove away together. During the ride, the attacker talked to Sandra and assured her that her friends would be okay because the guns used were not real guns, but special tranquilizer guns that put them to sleep. Sandra found this explanation believable, thinking that her friends were simply unconscious and that they would all be reunited after everything was over. The attacker took Sandra to an abandoned house. His accomplice's car followed behind. The attacker told Sandra to stay in the car, and he got out to discuss something with the other men. One of the men then approached the car, opened the passenger door, and roughly grabbed her by the neck, pulling her out of the car. She was then brutally attacked. The attacker then got into the car and asked for Sandra's home address before dropping her off. The incident ended around 4:00 a.m. before releasing Sandra from the car. He threatened to harm her family if she told anyone about the incident, however. Sandra went to the police station to report the incident. The police were confused as to why the perpetrator released Sandra, even driving her home. Despite knowing that she could expose them to the police, Sandra was the only person who could help find the 3 killers. So she worked closely with the police. They brought in an artist to create composite sketches of the suspects based on Sandra's descriptions. However, the criminals did not mention their real names to Sandra. The attacks happened at night, making it difficult for Sandra to see their faces. Therefore, the composite sketches may not be completely reliable. The only detail Sandra could provide with certainty was a description of the perpetrator's vehicle, which was a Chevy pickup from the early 1970s. After meeting Sandra, Stewart's car was discovered near a truck stop in Sioux Falls the following day. Forensic experts conducted a thorough examination and search of the car, looking for any fingerprints or other evidence that the perpetrator may have left behind. Unfortunately, the search did not yield any valuable information to aid the investigation. Police are investigating the location of the house where the criminal took Sandra, hoping to find clues. Data shows that this abandoned building is within 70 kilometers of the city. Search teams have been mobilized to locate the house as Thanksgiving approaches. Public pressure increases, and search teams are forced to speed up the search. The presence of 3 armed criminals, capable of violent crimes against children, makes people feel unsafe in their own homes. Sandra also joined in the search of the abandoned house. She also made regular visits to the police station to identify potential suspects based on composite sketches. Despite all their efforts, the case still hasn't yielded any leads. Sandra was placed under police guard at her home on Thanksgiving Day for her own safety, as she was the only witness who could identify the perpetrators. The police were concerned that the perpetrators might target Sandra after discovering that she had spoken to the police about them. On November 29, 1973, Sandra and the police discovered the White House with broken windows. It was the house where she had been brutally raped by a stranger. Sandra suddenly ran up to one of the police officers and threw her arms around him, terrified as the horrific memories of that night came flooding back to her. As she stepped back, she noticed a blue pickup truck on the road. Sandra pointed to the vehicle. Recognizing it as the one used by the criminals on the night of the massacre, the police quickly stopped the pickup truck and a man got out. He was identified as 29-year-old Alan Fryer. Sandra was horrified when she realized that this was the man who had been present at the attack. Alan was immediately arrested and taken to the police station. Alan initially denied ever having been to the sanctuary and had nothing to do with the deaths of the children in the case, claiming that he could never hurt children. However, when pressed by the police, Alan began to break down. He eventually admitted that he and 20-year-old David Fryer and 21-year-old James Fryer had indeed been to the sanctuary on the evening of the incident. Although he claimed not to have participated in the murders, he admitted that David and James had killed the children. Alan disputed Sandra's initial testimony, instead saying that the teenagers had attacked them, causing them to attack back in self-defense. Alan's story seems too unbelievable. Alan, David, and James were 3 brothers from a family of 7 sons and 6 daughters. They all lived on a farm where they developed a passion for animals, hunting, and farming. Their father, a strict disciplinarian, made his children work long hours on the farm from a young age. Disobedience to him would result in harsh punishments, earning him a reputation as a fearsome figure. The daughters of the family were known to be calm and quiet, while the sons were notorious troublemakers. Alan, the eldest, had a charm that allowed him to make many friends, but friends said he was dishonest, often exaggerating and telling false stories from a young age. Alan showed disturbing personality traits, while David, the second oldest, was apparently docile and quiet, often yielding to his older brother Alan. However, his younger brother James had a tendency towards criminal behavior from an early age. James's troubled path began at the age of 9. The 3 brothers were extremely close and protective of each other, never allowing one another to be harmed. As they grew older, their involvement in criminal activities intensified, with Alan often taking the lead and encouraging his brothers to participate in illicit deeds within the city. David and James were always by Alan's side, willingly engaging in these unlawful acts. This pattern of behavior ultimately led to David's arrest in 1967, at the age of 16, for recklessly driving through the city and firing a gun at random targets. The news did not come as a shock to the city's residents, as the 3 brothers were known to carry weapons and had a history of theft and robbery. Witnesses said they often ventured into the woods to hunt illegally when they were not committing other crimes. The 3 brothers often got into trouble, but they showed no remorse for their actions. 6 years after the shooting in the city, a tragic event occurred in the reserve. After a conversation with Alan, the police attempted to arrest David and James. David was later found at his residence, while James was in custody for robbery at the time. Notably, James had been released from prison shortly before the massacre. Sandra came to identify the suspects after they were arrested, despite their denials. She was able to identify each of the men who had killed her friend. The police continued to question them to piece together the events of that night. It was discovered that James had been released from prison on November 18, and that all three had decided to go hunting. Each had their own guns, 12, 16, and 20 caliber. While hunting, they accidentally discovered a fire in the forest and saw some teenagers smoking marijuana. The three brothers decided to take the drugs from the teenagers and headed to their camp. Roger was the first to discover them and stood up to confront them. He was instantly killed with a shotgun minutes after the massacre. Sandra and Alan got into a pickup truck and drove away. Stuart, badly injured, tried to stand up, then fell and died from his injuries. Dana and Michael were also killed. All three brothers were then arrested and waited behind bars for the trial to begin. Sandra expected James to be charged with rape, among other crimes, however. The judges decided that a murder charge would be enough to punish the offenders. Effectively ignoring Sandra's traumatic experiences during the trial, David Fryer confessed to the crimes and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Alan Fryer was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 4 terms of life in prison without parole on June 20, 1974. Alan was initially held in the Leon County Jail before being transferred to a maximum security prison. Coincidentally, Alan and James were both held at the facility. The brothers secretly communicated and soon hatched an escape plan. One night, Alan and James escaped from the prison in the early morning. Their escape went undetected for several hours, until one of the police discovered their empty cells. News of the brothers' escape spread quickly, causing a nationwide sensation and prompting a massive manhunt. Sandra, the prosecution's main witness, was particularly concerned about her safety. After learning about the escape, she believed that the brothers would retaliate against her, so the police provided her with armed guards. She lived in fear for days until the fugitives were finally apprehended in Gilley, Wyoming. James's trial took place in December 1974. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. Sandra spent a long time healing from the trauma she had experienced, including the brutal rape and brutal murder of her friends. Unfortunately, she faced further suffering due to the public backlash. With many blaming her for the incident, her classmates shunned and bullied her, making her teenage years even more difficult, especially since she had already had a troubled and unsupportive childhood. As Sandra grew older, she persevered and rebuilt her life. At age 26, she got married, had children, and eventually became a grandmother. Years later, in 2016, she decided to share her story by writing a book. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Annie Kasperzak. Annie Kasperzak was born on January 10, 1997, into a family that lacked love. Her parents suffered from severe drug addiction and mental health issues. Therefore, her living conditions since childhood have always been difficult. At a young age, she was removed from her parents' care and placed with a new family. However, things did not go smoothly, and her foster parents abandoned her just like her biological parents. As a result, by the age of 9, she had lived in 9 different families. Annie felt unwelcome and alone in the world, and her life in the orphanage had made her distrustful of people. Despite this, she held on to the hope of finding a loving family, one that would embrace her and provide the love she longed for. She dreamt of having a dad and mom who would care for her, accept her as their own. After Annie was returned by her ninth family, she went to an orphanage where she met Veronica Kasperzak. Veronica worked in Utah's social services, focused on finding suitable homes for children who had been cruelly treated. She was known as a very caring worker. For child and family protection services, she treated everyone she helped with genuine love. Upon meeting Annie, she was immediately touched by the girl's story. Annie told of being physically abused as a child. She lived in a cruel, unstable family, which had a great impact on her psychology. Veronica was moved to tears as she listened to her story. Veronica felt that life was unfair to she, and her tragedy touched Veronica's heart. As a result, Veronica and her relationship became close and warm. Veronica began visiting she regularly to provide her with emotional support. In January 2007, while 6 months pregnant, Veronica shared Annie's story with her husband, Dennis, who also longed for children. They decided to adopt Annie and welcome her into their family. Veronica and Dennis were kind and decent people, which allowed them to carry out their plans smoothly. Annie moved in with their family in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah, a few months later. Veronica gave birth to twins, both boys. By this time, all the bureaucratic hurdles related to Annie's adoption had been resolved, and she was warmly welcomed into the family. Even though this was her 10th time being adopted, she was full of enthusiasm and hope that the hardships of her life were behind her. She believed that now she would experience the love of her parents. Now that Annie had a home, wonderful parents, and 2 younger brothers, she embraced her role as a caring older sister. She happily babysat her younger siblings and helps her foster mother, Veronica. Her brothers take up most of her free time, and she felt fulfilled in this new role. She tries to broaden their horizons and teach them new things every day. She sincerely loved her new brothers, and they returned her affection. Not long after, Annie experienced her first trip to the beach. It was a family holiday before Christmas, and Veronica and Dennis organized a wonderful celebration for their children. They spent most of their time opening gifts. But during this period, tensions began to arise within the family. Veronica and Dennis believed that having children would strengthen their relationship and help them learn new aspects of family life. Unfortunately, this was not the case. After a while, Veronica and Dennis's family had a falling out, which led to many difficulties. Veronica, who had witnessed similar situations in the past, feared that her family might fall apart again, even after their divorce. Dennis kept a good relationship with Veronica and remained involved in raising their children, including their adopted daughter, Annie. Fortunately, Annie's fears of returning to the orphanage did not come true. Meanwhile, Veronica started new relationships and eventually remarried. Her new partner, James, turned out to be a loving and caring husband and father. Just like Dennis, he quickly bonded with Annie and treated her as if she were his own daughter. Family affection and warmth gradually returned to their lives, and the family moved to a peaceful small town in Utah called Riverton. It was an ideal place to start a new life. But this story would not have a happy ending. James admits, Annie has special gifts. She could convince anyone to do anything, especially when it came to asking for gifts. One day, she saw a pair of red shoes in a store she really liked, and she begged James to buy them, and he couldn't refuse. At this time, 15 years old, Annie was in her first year at the academy. She was an outstanding student, well liked by her teachers. She dreams of becoming a pediatrician. Due to her life experiences as a child, she always wanted to help other children. Veronica, her adoptive mother, was a guiding light for her, transforming her life. She dreamed of emulating her mother. By dedicating her life to helping others, she even imagined adopting more children to study with them at home and support them during this time. Annie also had her first love. These feelings came on suddenly, and she embraced them wholeheartedly. On the evening of March 10, 2012, She stayed home to look after her younger brothers. Because Veronica and James had gone out for dinner, this was a romantic date that they had long awaited and planned. When Veronica and James returned home, everything appeared normal. The only thing Veronica noticed was that Annie had changed from her usual shorts into jeans, which she thought was likely due to the chill. However, she didn't think much of it. Eventually, she decided to take a shower, while Annie went into her room to listen to music. After she finished her shower, she went into the room to check on Annie, but found it empty. She couldn't find her daughter in the house. Worried, Veronica and James began looking for clues to see where Annie had gone. James carefully inspected her room and discovered a note under her pillow. In the note, she explained that she could no longer stay at home and had chosen to run away to California with her boyfriend. She admitted that she was pregnant and asked her parents not to look for her or report her missing to the police. This shocked the family. They could not believe that this was happening to them, so they continued to search for information. A few months before these incidents, Annie began having sex as the escape date approached. She noticed strange changes in her body. She felt weak, nauseous, and dizzy. Occasionally, she felt unwell for no apparent reason. Eventually, she thought she was pregnant, but when she took a pregnancy test, she got a negative result. The pregnancy test results show that Annie is not pregnant, which worries her because she has been mentally preparing to become a mother. Despite this, her decision to leave seemed strange and surprised her parents. Veronica and James, they had always provided her with love and support, and she appeared happy in their family. Often caring for her younger brothers, they felt her decision to leave was sudden and unprepared, as she had not shared with them her current situation or future plans. Naturally, her parents, Veronica and James, were concerned about her leaving. With her phone turned off, they quickly reached out to the police for help. Their biggest concern was who she ran away with. The police and her parents began contacting her close friends. While still attempting to reach her by phone, however, she ignored all their calls and messages. Annie's boyfriend was Darwin Christopher Bagshaw. They first met during a math class at school and quickly developed an attraction. Their secret relationship lasted a year and a half before it was discovered. It was surprising that Annie's parents were unaware of her feelings, as she had kept her romance hidden from them. According to her best friend, she was deeply infatuated with Darwin and feared losing him. During their time together, their group of friends changed, as Veronica and James were unaware of the new friends Annie made. Then, Veronica managed to reach Darwin, suspecting that he might have run away with her daughter, Annie. Everyone was surprised when Darwin declared that he did not know where Annie was. He revealed that their relationship had ended, and at the time, she disappeared. She was dating someone new named LJ. Veronica and James were completely unfamiliar with LJ. They had never heard of him, while Veronica was reaching out to Annie's friends and acquaintances to learn more about him. James managed to track Annie's mobile phone using an app. He monitored its movement in real time on a map for a while. The phone was moving quickly. It was clear that Annie was not driving, but after a while of observation, the signal suddenly stopped and then disappeared. Veronica and James are unable to contact Annie until now. She had ignored all their attempts to contact her. They hurried to the store, searched the supermarket, and asked everyone if they had seen her. They showed photos of her, but no one recognized her. After reviewing the security camera footage, they still couldn't find her. Veronica continued to call out to her daughter, but she still did not respond. They are very worried, but still hope that everything will be fine with their daughter and wish for her to come home. On March 11, the day after Annie went missing, a man contacted the police. He noticed blood on the riverbank and initially thought it was from a wounded wild animal. When he got closer, he saw another pool of blood and a red shoe nearby. He found this suspicious, so he called the police. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and collected samples for analysis. The results showed that the samples belonged to the same person, because the last location Annie was seen coincided with where the blood was found. Investigators became suspicious. A search operation was soon organized. Divers were mobilized to examine the river, while others searched the shoreline. A rescue helicopter was also dispatched a few kilometers north of where the shoe was found. A girl in a red dress was found floating face down in the water when the search party pulled her body from the water. They were unable to identify her. Her face was so badly disfigured that a forensic examination was needed to identify her. Most of her facial bones were crushed, and her nose was almost gone. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blows to the head with a blunt object, and that she had died the night she went missing. It was clear that she had died tragically after the body was discovered. Police reported through the media that they had found a girl of Asian descent with dark hair, believed to be under 20. When Veronica and James saw the news, they quickly recognized that it was their daughter, Annie. Although physical features do not match Annie's, but James recognized the red shoes he had given his daughter before she disappeared. Additionally, Veronica noted that the deceased wore a red dress that perfectly matched the one missing from their home. Veronica and James initially hoped it was just a coincidence and that the police had found another victim, but they felt uneasy. Identifying the body took time. It was determined that the victim wore braces and had her gallbladder removed, which matched Annie's details perfectly. Ultimately, dental records and DNA analysis confirmed that the body was Annie's at that moment. Any hope of Annie returning home vanished, and her parents were devastated afterward. Detectives went to Annie's home to search her room. They looked for any evidence that might help identify the criminal. During the search, they discovered a diary in which she wrote about her on and off relationship with Darwin on her 15th birthday. Annie expressed her desire to have children, yearning to be a young mother and care for her child. On March 1, 2012, she wrote that she was pregnant by Darwin. However, she later regretted it when a pregnancy test came back negative. She explained that she had been using birth control pills. The autopsy confirmed that she had never been pregnant. Further entries in her diary showed that she was wrong and just wanted to believe in her dream. She hoped this would help keep Darwin by her side, but he had no intention of building a real family with her. Veronica and James informed the police about their conversation with Darwin on March 14. Detectives spoke with Darwin. He was accompanied by his father, Spencer. He was aware of the rumors about Annie's pregnancy, but insisted he could not be the father. He believed that she had become pregnant by LJ, who was 17 at the time. He did not know LJ personally, but described LJ based on rumors, saying LJ was a man of bad reputation. However, he was unable to provide any further information to the police. The police also questioned Darwin about his whereabouts during Annie's disappearance. He claimed to have an alibi, stating he was at his grandmother Wilma's house. He mentioned that he briefly visited a friend that evening, but returned home when he found him not there. His grandmother verified his account. Additionally, he agreed to provide DNA samples from the clothes and shoes he wore on the night of the incident. When he handed over his sneakers, he mentioned that there might be some of Annie's blood on them because her nose was bleeding during their last meeting and stuck to his shoe. Her father was present and confirmed his statement. As a result, he was confirmed to have an alibi and was removed from the list of suspects. Spencer, Darwin's father, was asked to provide information about the relationship between Darwin and Annie. The detectives specifically wanted to know about someone named LJ. He did recall a message he received through social media back in November that was sent from Annie's account, but signed by LJ. At the time, he thought the message seemed odd. Additionally, he has heard disturbing rumors about LJ, suggesting that LJ may be involved in a gang or even have committed murder. On March 15, Spencer again contacts the police to report that a mysterious individual named LJ has threatened to kill his son, Darwin. Darwin informed he about the threat when he returned from work, prompting he to report it to the police immediately. At a press conference, the authorities shared the available information. They appealed to the public for any tips that could aid in capturing the criminal. Unfortunately, This did not advance the investigation. The situation changed when a witness named Joanna Franklin contacted the police. She was in custody for fraud, but claimed to know LJ. She provided a brief description of LJ, saying he was a short man, about 20 years old. She also said she had more information about the case, but would only share it if the police dropped the charges against her. Ultimately, the police were forced to accept her request. Joanna then revealed that on the night of the murder, Annie and LG went to Daniel Robert Ferry's house. Daniel had a criminal record and was at the time engaged in the distribution of illegal substances. She was present that evening and witnessed LG and Annie go to the bathroom together, where they had sex. Afterward, they returned. Daniel then approached Annie and asked her to have sex with him. She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but then refused him. In anger, he grabbed her head and slammed her against the wall, causing blood to splatter all over the wallpaper. She collapsed onto the carpet, blood flowing from her broken nose, mouth, and ears. Daniel did not stop there. He kicked her several times, threatening that no one was allowed to laugh at him. She lay unconscious. Joanna went to check her pulse and saw that she was still alive, but Joanna did nothing. Because Joanna was afraid, Joanna noticed that Annie was still on the floor, her face very pale, but she was still breathing. The other teenagers at the party believed she was dead and showed no concern for her well-being. LJ returned to the room and saw the bloody scene. Daniel explained that he had taught Annie a lesson for laughing at him. LJ reacted calmly to Daniel's actions, and they began discussing what to do with Annie's body. Joanna watched as they wrapped she in a large towel, loaded her into a car, and drove away. A few hours later, they returned without Annie. When asked about Annie's, they claimed they had gone swimming near the canyon, saying that she had regained consciousness but then fought with them and ran away. Joanna and the others realized this was a lie and understood they had disposed of her body. The police asked Joanna about Annie's clothing. Joanna described she as wearing a lot of red, shoes and a dress. Coincides with how she was discovered. To verify Joanna's statement, investigators went to the home of dealer Daniel. He denied any involvement in the crime and claimed he had not harassed or harmed anyone. Detectives obtained a search warrant for his house, anticipating they would find blood on the walls and carpet. However, they discovered that the wall Joanna mentioned had been recently painted, and the carpet was missing, according to police experience. It appeared that the house had been renovated in a suspicious manner. During a thorough examination, forensic scientists discovered stains on the floor that looked like blood. As they continued their investigation, they became increasingly convinced that Joanna was telling the truth. Daniel was arrested and brought in for questioning. Witness testimony confirmed that Daniel was indeed a gang member and had a criminal record for drug trafficking. During the interrogation, he was accompanied by his lawyer. He denied knowing LJ and Annie. Even when shown a photograph of her, he insisted he did not know her name and maintained that he did not kill her. Despite Daniel's convincing testimony, detectives still suspected his involvement in Annie's murder. The lab results from stains collected at his house revealed they were not blood, but sauce. Aside from Joanna's testimony, there was no evidence to prove his guilt, forcing the detectives to release him. Later, they discovered that, during this time, he committed another crime. He may have been involved in an attack and kidnapping that took place in a nearby city, raising the authorities' suspicions even further. To clarify Daniel's whereabouts, authorities examined location data from his phone. The data showed that on March 10, the day Annie was murdered, he was in another city. After months of searching for evidence, investigators could not connect him to the crime, leading to his removal from the suspect list. Ultimately, Daniel confessed to the kidnapping and assault of another person, which he committed with a friend around the same time as Annie's murder. Proving they could not have been in two places at once, this indicated that they were not involved in Annie's death. The police reinterrogated Joanna. She admitted that she had made up the story. She wanted revenge on Daniel and knew that on the night of Annie's murder, he had kidnapped someone else. Her accusation misled the police, diverting their focus and allowing the real culprit to evade justice. Her lie wasted over a year of police investigation. Additionally, there were no leads on LJ, who had vanished without a trace, tragically. The detective in charge of the case was killed while on duty, and the investigation was handed over to a new officer. Unfortunately, significant information was lost with the deceased detective. In this context, Annie's family felt deeply affected and decided to offer a reward for anyone who could provide information leading to the arrest of the killer. A new investigator has begun to review all documents related to the case. He reread Annie's diary and noticed that a couple of months before her death, she had an intimate relationship with Darwin. Afterward, she had thought she might be pregnant, but that turned out to be a misunderstanding. It seemed that she wanted to use the child to keep Darwin with her, which could have been the motive for the murder. On the night of the murder, they had multiple calls with each other. That evening, her phone received 3 calls from an unknown number. The phone companies have been monitoring these calls and discovered that they came from Darwin's number. It seemed that Annie and Darwin had had an argument and were trying to mend their relationship over the phone. The police decide to reconsider Darwin's alibi, as he is the prime suspect and has a motive for the crime by tracking mobile calls. They discovered that his grandmother and father were lying. He was not with them that evening. They were only trying to corroborate his alibi and protect him. Furthermore, there was a lot of blood on his shoes, which made people even more suspicious of him. Meanwhile, his family seemed to be protecting him. After speaking with Darwin's father, Spencer, who was pressured by the detectives, he admitted that he had lied to the police 2 years ago. Upon reviewing messages between he and Darwin, they discover that Darwin asked him to create a false alibi to fool the police. The new investigator was surprised to learn that some friends referred to Darwin as LJ. The key piece of evidence against Darwin came from his cell phone location data. At the time of Annie's murder, it showed that he was at the riverbank where the body was found. This seemed to confirm that the case was finally solved. At the time, he was living with his mother in Colorado, prompting police to arrange an interview with him. When detectives approached him at the school, he appeared surprised. He refused to speak to them without a lawyer. He was extradited back to Utah in October 2014. Although he did not cooperate with the police, there was enough evidence to press charges against him, and his trial was set for March 2015, according to state law. Dennis was supposed to be tried as a minor, which would have allowed him to be released by the time he turned 21. However, this was not permissible given the seriousness of the crime. Therefore, the prosecution, with the backing of Annie's family, requested that he be tried as an adult. He was held in prison while awaiting trial. During this time, he confided in a fellow inmate, revealing the disturbing details of the murder. In his confession, Darwin explained that he had believed for a long time that Annie was pregnant. He was distressed at the thought of becoming a father at such a young age, especially since he had not yet completed school. To get out of this situation, he planned to kill Annie and suggested they meet by the river to discuss running away from home. She naively believed his lie when she arrived at their meeting place. She was dressed very beautifully. Darwin then attacked her, striking her in the face with a shovel multiple times. After she fell, he continued to hit her with the shovel. Finally, he placed the flat side of the shovel on her head and jumped on it until she no longer showed any signs of life. Experts confirmed that the injuries on she matched the actions described by Darwin. After Darwin confessed to the crime, the court decided to try him as an adult. Because his actions were so heinous, he was charged with first-degree murder. The defense lawyer argued that he did not understand his actions and felt remorse. However, Annie's family believed that he was just trying to gain sympathy to receive a lighter sentence. In the end, Darwin Christopher Bagshaw was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 15 years, he will be eligible for parole in 2034. Additionally, his father and grandmother face charges of perjury and obstruction of justice, each receiving a 2 years prison sentence. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Carly Ryan. Carly Ryan was born on January 31, 1992. In Australia, her mother, Sonia Ryan, was 20 years old at the time and raised her on her own. They lived in Stirling, a suburb of Adelaide in South Australia. She and her mother have a close relationship, always being a strong support for each other. Carly was a girl who always cared about others. She is also fascinated by many different subcultures and shares her passion for music with those close to her, along with her in-person friendships. She has many relationships on social media. She enjoyed spending time on platforms like MySpace and Vampire Freaks, where she interacted with others who shared her interest in subcultures such as goth on MySpace. Carly is known as SYSL. Her posts seem engaging and fit this nickname. Many of the photos she shared featured women tied with ropes or people using illegal drugs. Her profile lists interests such as drug use, smoking, drinking, music, intimate relations, and attending concerts. However, most of these hobbies were exaggerated or entirely fabricated and didn't reflect her real life. At one point, Carly's friend Ashley introduced her to a young man named Brandon Kane. Brandon was born in the United States but lived in Victoria, Australia. He claims to be 20 years old and says his hobby is playing the guitar. Initially, he had been communicating with Ashley as he was romantically interested in her. Their conversations were mostly casual, though occasionally they touched on more personal topics. Ashley disliked these intimate discussions, which caused their communication to taper off. However, when she posted a photo of herself with Carly, he reached out again and asked for Carly's email address. Shortly after, he sent Carly his first message after a while of exchanging messages. Carly fell in love with her new acquaintance, Brandon. He matched her idea of the perfect guy. Their conversation quickly turned romantic. Moving from messages to phone calls, the two stayed in touch for over a year, and as time passed, their feelings for each other grew stronger. Carly became completely captivated by Brandon and believed he was the love of her life. She even told all her friends and her mother about him. However, her mother, Sonia, was cautious about this relationship, recognizing the potential risks of such communication. It's unclear whether Sonia knew his age, but she suspected that he might be completely different from the person he claimed to be. At times, Sonia monitored her daughter, especially when Carly was chatting with Brandon. She had previously accessed Carly's MySpace account. The conversations there did not arouse any suspicion, even quite innocent. However, what shocked her was the photos found there. Because they were very private in nature, Sonia quickly expressed her concerns to her daughter, Carly, but she dismissed them. Although she herself sometimes found Brandon's behavior strange, some of his actions really made her insecure. Any parent would be alarmed by a 20-year-old man communicating with a 14-year-old girl. Not only was there an age difference, the demands he made on Carly were even more unusual. For instance, one day, Brandon asked Carly to kiss her friend Ashley and record it on video. Carly agreed because she really liked Brandon. However, Ashley was more cautious and wondered if the video might end up on an untrustworthy website. Her concerns grew when Carly began communicating with a man named Shane, who claimed to be Brandon's adoptive father. Like Brandon, he also had a MySpace account. Shane described himself as an honest security guard and a former military officer. He also claimed to have worked as a bodyguard for Marilyn Manson. It seemed that he and Brandon shared not only an interest in music, but also in underage girls. He frequently called Carly on the phone, even when she was spending time with her friends, and asked them inappropriate questions. For instance, He would ask if they were bisexual or if they enjoyed kissing other girls. Ashley felt uncomfortable with Shane's behavior and eventually confided in Carly about it. However, she reacted negatively, leading to an argument between the two friends. Despite this, she was eager to meet Brandon in person. The meeting was arranged for January 26, 2007, however. At the last minute, he announced that he could not come and said that his father, Shane, would come to see her. She happily agreed to this. At this time, Shane has acted as a father figure in Carly's life. Her mother, Sonia, was initially hesitant about allowing a stranger into their home, but Carly was adamant. In January 2007, Shane, a man who appeared to be around 50 years old, arrived at their house. In a light blue car, he was dressed in a security guard's uniform and, for some reason, quickly managed to gain Sonia's trust. Not only does Sonia allow Shane into her home, she also allows Carly to go shopping with him on his trip to the mall. He bought Carly a lot of things. Most of the gifts seemed normal, but some raised suspicions. In total, he spent about $260, however. This generosity was a ploy, as he used the opportunity to secretly watch Carly undress while she tried on clothes during Carly's birthday party. She spent much of her time with her ex-boyfriends, which greatly upset Shane. He felt that she wasn't giving him enough attention. Later in the evening, he managed to gain Carly's favor and went for a walk with her and her friend, Rihanna. While walking, he tried to force two girls to kiss. Rihanna refused, which caused Carly to burst into tears and run back to the house. One night, when Carly was sleeping, something strange happened. Shane climbed into her bed and whispered that he loved her very much and that he wouldn't let anything harm her. The next morning, Co recounted the entire event to her mother, Sonia, immediately. Her mother confronted Shane to clarify matters. Sonia asked her daughter whether he had touched her, and she answered yes. However, she did not want Brandon to know about this. She even asked her mother to speak with Shane and resolve the situation peacefully. However, Sonia was furious. She decided to cut all ties between Carly, Brandon, and Shane not long after. She sent Shane a letter demanding that he stop contacting her daughter and threatened to involve the police if he didn't comply. Shane's reply was full of anger. He acknowledged there was some truth to what Sonia had accused him of and warned her that he intended to sue her. Although Shane is no longer at their house, Sonia knows that she and her daughter, Carly, are still in danger. There's also a chance he'll try to get back in touch with Carly. However, at this stage, Sonia had no idea that the man who appeared in her house wasn't Shane. He wasn't a security guard, a former soldier, or even the father of someone named Brandon. In fact, both Shane and Brandon's identities are fabrications, created by the same person, Gary Francis Newman. But who is he? The woman, known to Australian media as Christine, found her home had become a prison after marrying Gary. He sought to take complete control of her life. Christine said he would often beat her for seemingly trivial reasons, such as wanting to go shopping with friends or being a few minutes late. These would send him into a rage. Christine worked at a strip club, and her husband, Gary, took all the money she earned when she refused to return to work. He forced her to go back. One day, when she mentioned she planned to go shopping with a friend, he violently dragged her into a room. He pinned her down and began beating her until she lost consciousness. Afterward, he left her lying on the floor. Miraculously, she managed to crawl to the front door, where Gary's mother happened to arrive, shocked by her condition. His mother immediately called a doctor. During the examination, the doctor asked Christine if her husband, Gary, had assaulted her. However, Gary's presence intimidated her into silence. He even squeezed her hand so hard that he broke several of her fingers. Eventually, she found the courage to escape and relocate to Melbourne. Gary seemed unbothered by her departure. He felt free and began to act on his instincts. He became interested in adult films featuring women in schoolgirl uniforms. It wasn't long before he had the idea to make his dark fantasies a reality before pursuing Carly. Gary has tried many times to get acquainted with other girls, each time assuming a new identity. Amazingly, between 2002 and 2003, he created over 200 MySpace accounts. During this period, he tried to establish contact with a 14-year-old girl in the United States, referring to her as a princess and even calling her his wife, using the pseudonym Nesh. He also spoke to another girl in Singapore and even flew there to meet her. However, she deceived him and did not show up, which deeply affected his mental health. He confided in a friend, saying the girl would pay for this betrayal. Gary's obsession soon spiraled out of control. At one point, he contemplated getting his own daughter, who was under 13 years old, to lure her into having intimate relations with him. Thankfully, he never acted on this horrific plan when it came to Carly. He hoped she would accept his advances and envisioned starting a new life with her. He even told his colleagues about his plans to move to Adelaide. However, when his intentions were exposed, he realized his dream was slipping away. Consumed by anger, he decided to seek revenge. He wanted Carly to suffer. That became his dark goal. During February, Gary and Carly remained in contact while impersonating Brandon. He hinted at Shane's presence, and she agreed to meet. His task was to find a young man to play the role of Brandon. He was well prepared for this plan. As he had previously adopted a 17-year-old boy, this teenager was chosen to impersonate Brandon. That month, Gary and his adopted son traveled to Adelaide. Meanwhile, Carly lied to her mother, Sonia, claiming she would be spending the night at a friend's house. Perhaps feeling guilty about the lie, she hugged her mother several times before leaving and told her she loved her. She then exited the house through the back door. She was met on the street by a man she knew as Shane and the teenager pretending to be Brandon. They then visited Port Elliot, a well-known tourist destination in South Australia. They walked around the town and eventually stopped at a local bay, where Gary gave Carly illegal drugs. After 10 p.m., in a secluded area of the bay, taking advantage of Carly's unconscious state, he knocked her face down into the water and then attacked her. His adopted son assisted by holding Carly down. Then, Gary struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. Eventually, he and his adopted son threw her into the water, intending to drown her, and she did not survive. The next morning, a woman named Kim Griffin discovered Carly's lifeless body. Unable to find anyone nearby to assist, she ran to the closest parking lot, where she encountered a fisherman named Ian Slate. Ian agreed to help, and together they pulled Carly's body onto the shore. After checking for a pulse, they realized she was already dead. Minutes later, Kim contacted the police and emergency services. On February 20, 2007, Carly was officially declared deceased. An autopsy later revealed that she had suffered at least 19 injuries, including head trauma. Additionally, her body had multiple cuts and scratches. Traces of cannabinoids were found in her blood. Experts determined that she had died shortly before Kim found her. Her mother, Sonia, was devastated by the tragedy. She struggled to understand how her daughter had ended up in such a remote location, far from home. CCTV footage from Port Elliot revealed that Carly was accompanied by two men. In one video, the three were seen near the Crown Hotel. In another, near a fast food restaurant. Investigators have spoken to several witnesses. One witness said a man asked him where to buy drinks. He directed them toward the bay. A supermarket cashier, who sold the man cigarettes around 9 p.m., said he asked the same question. Witnesses described Carly as goth or emo. Several people interviewed mentioned seeing a light blue car with Victorian plates. The car was parked on a cliff, and on the control panel there is something that looks like a security guard's card. Investigators reviewed Carly's last phone calls to identify who she had contacted before her death. One number was registered in Melbourne and the other in Adelaide. Despite efforts, the police were unable to identify the owners of these phone numbers. However, geolocation data provided crucial insights. Some calls were made from Euchreville, a suburb of Adelaide located just a few kilometers from Carly's home, where a trailer park housed people living in their vehicles when investigators visited the area. The light blue car with Victorian plates was no longer there, however. Several residents confirmed seeing the car and the individuals inside it. CCTV footage helped identify the car and its number plate, which provided crucial information. Tracing the number plate led investigators to a house on the Mornington Peninsula, south of Melbourne. The house was owned by a 48-year-old man named Gary Francis Newman. The wanted car was parked in front of the house, making Gary the prime suspect in Carly's murder. When police entered the house, they found Gary sitting at a computer, chatting with a 14-year-old girl from Western Australia. He was once again pretending to be Brandon. It had been just 11 days since Carly's body was discovered in the bay, and he was already targeting another victim during a search of the house. Investigators uncovered numerous items linked to his criminal activities. Notebooks revealed details of 200 fake identities Gary used to communicate with underage girls. Evidence also indicated that he had been engaging in these predatory actions for a long time. One particularly chilling note read, "Rest in peace, Carly Ryan." Police also found sand from Port Elliot on Gary's shoes. Unfortunately, by the time of his arrest, he had already deleted many messages from his profile, and most of the messages between him and Carly were lost. However, recordings of phone calls with Carly were recovered from his computer, including conversations where he pretended to be Brandon. The last exchange between he and she took place shortly before her death, during which they arranged to meet on the 19th, when experts compared Gary's DNA to samples found on Carly's clothing. They determined that the samples matched. This proves that he had contact with her and was at the beach on the day of the murder, even though the evidence is very clear. He maintained his innocence. He tried to blame his adopted son. However, the boy gave a completely different account, accusing Gary of being responsible for everything. As a result, both were arrested. Their trial lasted nearly 3 years. Throughout the trial, Gary continued to deny his guilt, as he had been doing for months. He shifted the blame to his son, insulted him, and accused him of lying. He also claimed that the authorities and the media had conspired against him. While in prison, he wrote several letters to his relatives, asking them to help him and support his alibi. However, instead of helping him, his family reported his requests to the police until the trial ends. Carly's identity remains absolutely secret. The only publicly known details were about her personality. Initially, the media portrayed her as a troubled teenager, and it was reported that she had wanted a relationship with an older man. This information caused the case to receive nationwide attention. The first court hearing occurred on October 20, 2009, at the Supreme Court of South Australia. Just before the trial began, Justice Trish Kelly declared that evidence, such as conversations between Gary and other teenage girls, would not be admissible. She would only admit evidence that was directly relevant to Carly's case. The prosecution argued that Gary and his adopted son jointly managed the profiles of Brandon and Shane. However, the son's defense claimed he merely helped his father cover up the crime. For a long time, Gary and his legal team tried to shift all blame for Carly's death onto his adopted son. However, during a court appearance in January 2010, he shocked everyone by changing his stance. He claimed neither he nor his son was responsible for her death. He asserted that he never had feelings for Carly and describes their relationship as similar to that between a stepfather and daughter. Furthermore, Gary says that he has no feelings for anyone, as he is asexual, meaning he is not interested in intimacy. However, this was only his testimony in court, according to Gary. The only person who had feelings for Carly was his adopted son. Gary claims he pretended to be Shane. While his adopted son played the role of Brandon, he explained that he had been obsessed with social media for a long time, which he attributed to his bipolar disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He stated that he fabricated the situation as part of a study, which he intended to use for writing a book about social media manipulation. Although he denies causing Carly's death, he admits to taking her away from her home to explain his actions. Gary said that Carly and his adopted son had attended a party in town, and only then did he meet them. Finally, he and his son returned home. Leaving Carly alone on the beach, he hoped that this testimony would have his charges reduced to manslaughter, suggesting that Carly had harmed herself, however. The jury did not accept this testimony. As a result, Gary Francis Newman was convicted of Carly's murder on January 21, 2012. A judge sentenced Gary to life in prison without the possibility of parole until he had served 29 years. All charges against his adopted son, who was a minor at the time, were dropped. The son's identity was never revealed following the trial. Sonia Ko founded the Carly Ryan Foundation, a nonprofit focused on promoting online safety following the tragic loss of her daughter Carly. Her goal was not to stop young people from using the internet, but to ensure they could do so safely over time. The foundation's efforts led to the introduction of a new law addressing grooming and cybercrimes, particularly cases where offenders concealed their age and identity. Sonia regularly gives educational presentations to schools in Australia and New Zealand. She is a symbol of resilience for many families and always try our best to prevent similar situations from happening again. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Molly Martins Corbett. On February 12, 1976, Jason Corbett was born in Limerick, Ireland. His family was very happy, and he was one of 8 children raised by his parents, Rita and John. Jason had a twin brother named Wayne when his father lost his job. Jason quickly took a part-time job as a security guard at the school sports center. He was eager to earn extra money to support his family. Jason was loved by his family and respected by his friends. He was intelligent and easygoing. Jason met Margaret Fitzpatrick. They later got married and welcomed their first child in September 2004, a son named Jack. 2 years later, they had a daughter. Sarah, Margaret, and Jason lived happily together and raised their children together. However, their happy life took a tragic turn on November 21, 2006, just 3 months after Sarah was born. That night, Margaret woke up and felt an asthma attack begin. Previously, a nebulizer had helped her, but this time, the medication did not work. Jason rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, they lost precious time and did not arrive in time. Margaret passed away. Jason was extremely sad after losing his wife. He could not imagine how deep the grief was, especially when he was faced with the challenge of raising 2 young children alone. He felt as if he had lost everything, but he knew that his son and daughter were waiting for him at home. This realization forced him to be strong for them, instead of succumbing to despair. Jason tried to hold on for his children, which gave him the strength to continue. Jason's relatives tried their best to support him, although he appreciated their help. Jason did not want to be a burden to his family. He decided to hire a nanny in 2007. The first woman who came to help was Czech, but they had difficulty communicating, and he had to let her go. He then hired a Spanish woman, but she did not speak English, which Jason had trouble with. In addition, both women were looking for temporary work, and Jason wanted to find someone more stable. He needed a long-term nanny who could be a part of his children's lives and provide reliable support for the family. After careful consideration, Jason concluded that hiring an English-speaking nanny who was looking for permanent employment would be the best solution. In early February 2008, he received an email from Molly Martins Corbett, a 20-year-old woman. She attached a resume that was later found to contain false information. Molly claimed to have graduated from Clemson University. Although she had actually dropped out, she also claimed that she had passed a test and was licensed to be a foster parent, which was also not true. Molly had a tendency to lie frequently and was often caught in the act. However, Jason did not know this and believed that he had found the right person. Molly agreed to move to Ireland to care for Sarah and Jack. She lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and flew to Ireland on March 10, 2008. Things did not start well for Molly when she arrived at customs. She was refused entry because she had only purchased a one-way ticket. This caused complications with immigration because she could not confirm how long she would be staying or provide a special work visa. Eventually, Molly was able to resolve the issues and was allowed to enter the country. Jason asked a good friend of his to pick Molly up at the airport. The friend later said that, when she first met Molly, she felt that the young woman might not be right for Jason. Molly was attractive and dressed very formally, almost as if she were competing for a beauty pageant rather than working. However, Sarah and Jack quickly got used to Molly, and things seemed to go well. Molly looked after the children, and Jason felt very comfortable. Over time, Molly and Jason developed a closer relationship, and Jason began to ask her out on dates. However, it is important to mention Molly's American boyfriend, Keith. They were together for years until Molly decided to work in Ireland. Her ex-boyfriend, Keith, claimed that they had not officially broken up before she moved. He also alleged that Molly had mental health issues and had just been released from a psychiatric hospital, according to Keith. She was not in a position to move to another country and look after children who had lost their mother. Molly had told Keith that she would be staying in Ireland temporarily, which was strange because she had told Jason that she wanted to be a housekeeper for a long time. After 2 weeks in Ireland, Molly informed Keith that she would not be returning. The news devastated him. Keith felt betrayed. It seemed that Molly had made a firm decision to cut Keith out of her life, which hurt him deeply. Jason felt reassured that Molly was getting along with his children and that everything seemed to be going well. The children were growing attached to Molly, and everything seemed fine. However, Tracy, Jason's sister, realized that Molly had some suspicious points. Molly did not want to discuss her past in America, no matter how they asked. She always answered vaguely, as if she was hiding the truth. The couple's relationship progressed quickly, but Jason emailed Molly and asked her to return to house for a while. He expressed in the email that he felt their relationship was moving too fast and admitted that he was not ready for a second marriage. This upset Molly, and she responded with some harsh words. In the end, they decided to stay together, but Jason wanted Molly to find another apartment and a new job. Molly agreed to this, but in the end, she never moved out and continued to live in Jason's house. One day, she expressed that she no longer wanted to live in the house where his ex-wife Margaret used to live. After much persuasion, Jason agreed and sold the house. On Valentine's Day, 2010, he proposed to Molly. He truly loved her, and, most importantly, he was sure that the children loved her too. The couple got engaged, and their life together became lively and joyful. Eventually, Molly said that she missed her homeland and wanted to leave Ireland, suggesting that the family moved to the United States. Jason's family then moved to North Carolina, where they bought a house. The wedding took place on June 4, 2011, in Nishi. Molly's father, Thomas Martins, escorted her down the aisle, while Jack and Sarah carried the ring and flowers. The photos taken that day capture the joyful atmosphere. However, there are some important details to consider. Molly claimed to her friends that she and Margaret were friends before Margaret's death. This is not true, as Margaret died in 2006, and Molly did not know Jason or his wife before that. Molly's tendency to spread misinformation is worrying. During the wedding, she also threw a tantrum over the McDonald's food Jason's nephew was eating. The boy had food allergies and could not eat from the communal table. One of the guests noticed this, went to McDonald's, and bought the child some snacks. This angered Molly, who reacted violently and lost her temper several times. Years later, Jason's family still lives in North Carolina, and the kids call Molly Mommy. Molly works part-time as a swim instructor and spends most of her free time at home with the kids. Meanwhile, Jason works long hours as a manager at a packaging plant. The couple has made many new friends, and Jason is well liked for his kindness and friendliness. He is often seen chatting with neighbors or hanging out with friends, although things seem to be going well for them. There are actually some underlying problems in their marriage. One of the biggest problems is that Molly wants to adopt a child, but Jason is against the idea. He refuses his wife's request, not out of anger, but perhaps because he doubts the longevity of their relationship over time. Jason begins to seriously consider divorce and the possibility of moving back to Ireland with his son and daughter. Realizing that their relationship is not healthy, Jason hid the children's passports. Worried that she might take them away, Molly sought legal advice about her parental rights in the event of a divorce. As she was not the biological mother of their children, Molly then deliberately made a recording. On the advice of her lawyer during their argument, the recording was intended to prove that Jason was a bad or even abusive father, which would aid Molly's efforts to gain custody of Sarah and Jack to gather evidence. Molly secretly placed recording devices around the house to record Jason during one of his tantrums. As a result, she was left with audio files that portrayed him in a negative light. During one dinner, Molly deliberately provoked Jason, causing him to lose his temper, while she accused him of ignoring her and refusing to listen. This argument was recorded in front of their children, making Jason appear to be an abusive husband and father. On the morning of August 2, Molly's parents, Thomas and Sharon, traveled to North Carolina to visit family. They arrived late at 8:30 p.m. Just in time for dinner, they planned to give the children the gifts they had prepared the following morning. This was especially meaningful for Jack, who would receive a baseball bat, while Sarah would receive a tennis racket after dinner. Thomas and Sharon went to the guest bedroom in the basement, while Jason and Molly went to the master bedroom on the first floor. The children went to their room on the second floor, according to Molly. Sarah woke her up at 3 a.m. after having a nightmare. Molly then took Sarah to her room and covered her with a blanket. However, when Molly returned, Jason was awake and very angry. Apparently because he had been disturbed in the middle of the night, his anger caused a fight. Shortly after the fight allegedly began, Thomas heard strange noises coming from his daughter Molly's bedroom. Worried, he grabbed a baseball bat and entered the room. When he opened the door, he found Jason holding Molly by the neck. When he recognized Thomas, Jason grabbed Molly by the neck, dragging her into the bathroom. While threatening to kill her, Thomas begged Jason to let her go. But when he realized his pleas were in vain, he charged at Jason and knocked him to the ground after being beaten. Jason continued to strangle Molly. Thomas continued to beat Jason. Jason then released Molly to grab the bat and tried to pull it away. A struggle ensued, and Jason pushed Thomas, causing him to fall to the floor. Jason tried to grab the bat, and at that moment, Molly shouted angrily at Jason not to hurt her father, fearing that Jason might kill her father. Molly picked up a brick from the nightstand and smashed it into Jason's head. Molly and her father took turns attacking Jason until they realized he was dead. Thomas then called the police to report the incident. Thomas told the police that Jason had been fighting with his wife, and Thomas had intervened. Now, Jason was in dire need of help when the police and ambulance arrived at the scene. They found that the incident was much more brutal than self-defense. Jason had many serious injuries on his body. Thomas and Molly claimed that they had killed Jason to ensure that he no longer posed a threat. However, considering the severity of Jason's injuries, it appears that some of them occurred when Jason was no longer a threat. Fortunately, the children were asleep and did not hear the noise. The police removed them from the chaotic scene and placed them in a patrol car. One of the officers reported that when they found Molly, she was crying loudly but had no tears. She was rubbing her neck and said that her neck hurt because Jason had tried to strangle her, aside from a small red mark on her throat. Molly had no other injuries, and neither did Thomas. Although he claimed that they had gotten into a violent fight over a baseball bat, Molly and Thomas were taken to the police station to give formal statements. Molly claimed that she and her father killed Jason in self-defense because he had attacked her. She explained that he had been drinking heavily that day and was angry when he was woken up in the night. Molly could not recall specific details after the initial brick attack, but insisted that everything she and her father did was in self-defense. She also claimed that she had been abused by her husband for years, but kept quiet for fear of losing custody of her children. The investigation found no evidence of physical abuse against Molly during her stay with Jason. Recordings from Molly showed that Jason had a bad temper, but he could not be considered cruel to his wife. Thomas's testimony was consistent with his daughter's. He also noted that Jason had been drunk that night. Thomas also claimed that Jason's first wife had died under suspicious circumstances, which was completely false and insulting. In fact, Jason's first wife had died of an asthma attack, as confirmed by medical experts. When Tracy heard about her brother Jason's death, she quickly flew to the United States to speak to the police. She expressed her belief that Molly may not have been completely truthful in her account, and the police shared her suspicions. Tracy confirmed that her brother had intended to divorce Molly and move back to Ireland with the children. This could have been a motive for the murder. On August 3, the day after Jason's death, an autopsy was performed. Medical experts found that Jason had died from blunt force trauma to the head, including multiple lacerations, abrasions, and bruises, along with severe skull fractures from blunt force trauma. The injuries were so severe that the medical examiner was unable to determine exactly how many times he had been hit, but it was clear that he had been hit at least 12 times. Then a shocking analysis by a toxicologist. Molly claimed that Jason had been drinking all day, but tests showed that his blood alcohol level was very low. What was particularly strange was that traces of antidepressants were found in his system. The medication had been prescribed to Molly just days before Jason's death. Additionally, Jason had recently told his doctor that he was experiencing sudden, unexplained anger, although this has not been confirmed. Jason's family members suspect that Molly may have given him his drugs during this time. The children were placed in temporary care of Molly's brother. However, on August 3, Jack and Sarah were brought in to speak to social workers. It is hoped that the children may provide insight into their parents' dysfunctional marriage. Jack and Sarah revealed that their father was always angry and even hurt Molly. Additionally, Jack revealed important information about a brick on the nightstand in the master bedroom that had not been there before. The police were surprised, but Molly explained that she and the children had planned to paint the brick and place it outside. Apparently, the family had an artistic agenda, and Molly had brought the brick into the house after it had rained. However, one has to wonder why she did not leave it in the hallway or by the door. Instead, it was in the bedroom, right next to the bed, which seemed odd. Shortly thereafter, Molly sought custody of Jack and Sarah, alleging that Tracy had attempted to kidnap the children. This request granted her temporary custody, however. The details of the alleged kidnapping were unclear. A hearing was held to resolve the matter, and custody was eventually awarded to Tracy and her husband. According to Jason's will, the conflict between Molly and Jason's family was extremely tense regarding the handling of Jason's remains. Molly wanted him cremated immediately, while Tracy wanted his body returned to Ireland for burial. Molly eventually agreed to the burial, but only if her sister paid for the entire funeral expenses. Jason's body was then returned to his homeland. Initially, Jason's family was very worried that Thomas and Molly would avoid responsibility, but they were arrested. On December 18, 2015, a grand jury indicted Thomas Martins and Molly Martins on charges of second-degree murder and negligent manslaughter. Neither of them admitted guilt. A joint trial was set for June 2017. Before the trial, Molly gave an interview to a television channel in which she reiterated her claims of Jason's abuse and asserted her innocence in his death. However, at this point, Jack and Sarah changed their original statements. They claimed that their father was not abusive and that they had been coerced into lying. This development further complicated the situation, as no testimony from the children was considered admissible in court, giving neither the prosecution nor the defense an advantage. Both sides presented forensic evidence in court, including crime scene photographs and medical evidence to prove that Jason had been brutally murdered. The prosecution pointed to Jason's $600 life insurance policy and pointed out that he had not formally adopted Molly, suggesting a strong motive for the crime. The defense portrayed Jason as a terrible person and a cruel husband. Molly chose not to speak in her defense, which may have worked in her favor. The trial lasted until August 9, 2017, and after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Molly Martins and Thomas Martins guilty and sentenced them to 20 to 25 years in prison. A week later, Thomas and Molly filed an appeal, arguing that the jury had acted improperly. Specifically, they pointed out that immediately after the trial, a juror had spoken to a member of the press, which they found unacceptable. On December 1, 2017, they filed an appeal to the North Carolina Supreme Court, and in early 2021, they were successful. Thomas and Molly were released on $200 bail and left the Davidson County Jail within an hour of each other. Following their release, there was reasonable speculation about a potential settlement. However, the father and daughter maintained their innocence. Their retrial in October 2023, Thomas Martins and Molly Martins entered into a plea agreement for manslaughter after their guilty pleas. Davidson Superior Court Judge David Hall sentenced Molly and Thomas to between 51 and 74 months in prison. They have already served 44 months, and each person will only spend 7 months in prison for good behavior. Jack and Sarah are now young adults. Their aunt, Tracy, and uncle, David, adopted them and moved to Ireland. With Tracy's guidance, Sarah wrote a series of children's books aimed at helping children cope with the loneliness of losing a loved one. Going through their parents' divorce, Jack has become a singer-songwriter and is also a keen rugby player. Hey detectives, welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jan and Quiana Pietrzak. On October 15, 2008, 24 years old Jan Paweł Pietrzak and his 26 years old wife, Quiana Jenkins Pietrzak, failed to show up for work and stopped responding to calls. Yanni, a sergeant and helicopter mechanic who had served in Iraq, worked at the Marine Air Base Camp Pendleton. His wife, Quiana, had just begun her career in medicine at a medical center that supported pregnant black women and provided birth preparation counseling. His co-workers reported him missing to the police. When the detectives arrived at Jan's home, they found both he and Quiana dead. The house was in a state of disarray, indicating that every room had been ransacked. Investigators needed to determine who committed such a brutal act against the Pietrzaks and why. Was it a robbery or was it revenge? They had only been married for 2 months. Quiana had thoughtfully chosen August 80, 2008 for their wedding, a memorable and significant date. So Jan would never forget their anniversary. The wedding had been flawless. Even though Jan and Quiana were nervous throughout the day, Jan was captivated by how stunning Quiana looked as his bride. They rode in a convertible, expressing their love for one another. They were deeply in love, and their life together was just beginning. He treated her like a queen, always fulfilling her wishes They had been together for years, and he even gifted her a puppy named Rambo. They just bought a big house because they are planning to have children soon. They dreamed of having many children and often imagined what their future kids would look like. Back at the scene, Jan and Quiana had been attacked in the head, their hands bound behind their backs with duct tape. Investigators later discovered that Quiana had been abused. In Jan's mouth was a sock wrapped tightly with tape, and there were shoe prints on his back, indicating that his attacker had stepped or jumped on him. There were also traces of gasoline spilled in the house, indicating that the attacker had tried to set fire to destroy evidence, but was unsuccessful near the house. Police discovered footprints and traces of alcohol. They concluded that there were at least 3 criminals. Jan and Quiana were killed by gunfire, but no shell casings or weapons were found at the scene. Valuables and jewelry were missing from the house, including wedding rings, gold jewelry, expensive watches, Quiana's bank card, and other personal items. When Marine police agents reviewed crime scene photographs to assist the local police, they noticed a critical detail. In one photo taken in the bedroom closet, they spotted a duffel bag commonly used by the Marine Corps, often called a Navy bag, which servicemen used to store military gear. One agent speculated that the attackers left the bag behind because they already had a similar one with military equipment. Agent Matt Timons theorized that the criminals were likely Marines. Quiana's stolen bank card was used at 3:20 a.m., just a few hours after the crime, at a location about 1 kilometer from the airbase where Jan worked. This further led detectives to suspect that the incident was Marine Corps related. Police obtained ATM footage showing a man withdrawing several $100s. He wore a blue bandana, partially covering his face, and used his hand to obscure it further. He was wearing a glove with the brand Mechanics written on it and appeared to know the PIN code for Quiana's card. The footprints found near the Jan house became key evidence. Almost as valuable as a fingerprint, the patterns of the soles showed that they belonged to 2 different types of sneakers, made by Nike 9 days after the tragedy. On October 24, Jan and Quiana were buried together. Hundreds of people, including military personnel, attended their funeral. Jan's mother, Hendrik Varg, cried as she said that her son was a handsome man and that she was heartbroken to have to bury him. She shared that it was unnatural, as she had always thought that she would die before Jan. She also mentioned that they had had a wedding ceremony not long ago and that they were now in coffins. Detectives are still trying to figure out who could have hated Jan and Quiana so much. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, has assisted in the investigation by compiling a list of Marines who worked with Jan. Investigators have also interviewed 2 of his closest friends, Heidi Hansen and Matt Farrar. 2 friends said Jan often bragged to his co-workers about his big house, showing off photos of his beautiful wife, and mentioning that he recently received a $30 bonus, which he kept at home along with his savings. Detectives said this may have been the reason someone broke into his house and took his money and jewelry. However, another motive was quickly discovered at work. Jan was a strict sergeant who prioritized precision and discipline. For him, the Marine Corps represented brotherhood, and he held great pride in the American flag, which he saw as a symbol of freedom. However, his communication style at work may make his subordinates unhappy. A friend revealed that Jan often had conflicts with some of his junior Marines because they did not want to follow his orders. One colleague mentioned Lance Corporal Tyrone Miller, who was under Jan's command. He hated Jan very much, and after Jan was killed, he expressed that he was happy. However, he regretted Quiana's death. Some colleagues said he might be involved in a criminal gang. Detectives wanted to find Tyrone for questioning, but found out that he was in hospital. he was injured the night before Jan and Quiana's funeral. Right near their home, the shooting appeared to have been deliberate. Coming from a drive-by shooter, detectives were convinced this incident was no coincidence and suspected his involvement in the Pietrzak family's tragedy on October 28, 20 years old. Tyrone arrived at the police station for questioning. Investigators asked him why he disliked Jan so much. He admitted that he frequently argued with Jan at work and felt he deserved a promotion, which had not happened. He believed that Jan was responsible for this, however. He also admitted that, in a way, he was grateful to Jan because thanks to Jan, he had matured during his time in service and taught him valuable lessons. When detectives questioned Tyrone about a recent injury, he claimed it was unrelated to the attack on the Pietrzak family regarding the incident of October 15, the day of the tragedy. He stated he was at home with his family and denied any involvement. He explained that he was married, had 2 children, and lived in a military town where he served. He also mentioned that he had only been to John's house once, a few months earlier. With his wife, the detectives tried to fool Tyrone by saying that they had data from his cell phone. That would allow them to pinpoint his exact location on the day of the incident. This made him visibly nervous, and he began avoiding their questions. He eventually admitted that he occasionally drove past Jan's house with friends, the most recent time being about 2 weeks prior. Around the same time as the tragedy, detectives pressed further, asking about the clothes he had worn that day. He said he and his friends usually wore baggy sweatshirts and shirts, along with blue bandanas. He also described his shoes, which turned out to be Nike sneakers. The shoe prints matched the tracks found near the Pietrzak family's house. At this point, detectives were convinced that Tyrone was the perpetrator. Investigators released Tyrone and obtained a warrant to search his house. Police, wearing bulletproof vests, arrived at his home when no one answered. They broke down the door to get in. The first person they saw was his wife. Then he appeared, holding his daughter as a shield and trying to run into the back bedroom. The scene was chaotic. Officers shouted at him to release his daughter and lie on the floor. Eventually, he complied. His family sat on the sofa as the police began searching the house. The search was quick. On the table near the sofa, officers found a bank card belonging to Quiana, but the evidence didn't stop there. In his closet, detectives found the ceremonial blue uniform of John, the uniform the Marines take pride in. They also discovered 4 shell casings in a plastic bag and various weapons in the home, including one that was determined to have been used in the attack on John and Quiana's home in a black backpack. They discovered several blue bandanas and gloves from the Mechanics brand. They later found a pair of sneakers that matched one of the footprints at the crime scene. In addition, several other items were found in the house, but were not related to this case. For example, multiple identification cards, jewelry, and other items, suggesting that he may have been involved in other crimes. Tyrone was arrested and taken into custody, despite the substantial evidence against him. He initially denied any involvement in the case during interrogation. However, he admitted to participating in the incident, but claimed his role was minor. He stated that he broke into Sergeant Jan's house intending to steal maps and jewelry. He also tried to present the crime as racially motivated. Tyrone implicated 2 fellow Marines, Immerse John and Kevin Cox. In the case, Lance Corporal Immerse, 18, worked under John, while Private Kevin, 20, was an electrician at the air base. He confessed that the original plan was to rob and intimidate Jan, but events spiraled out of control, according to him. Immerse was the one who attacked both Jan and Quiana. He also claimed Kevin was actively involved throughout the incident. Not long after, investigators discovered another accomplice, a Marine. The man known by the nickname Psycho was 21 years old, Keeson Sykes. a clerk working at the airbase. Initially, Sykes, along with Immerse and Kevin, denied any involvement in the tragic incident at the Peterzak family home. However, they later confessed, and Sykes revealed that it was Immerse who attacked Jan and Quiana. After questioning all 4 suspects, detectives were able to piece together what had happened that day. They go to John and Quiana's house. All of them, except Kevin, wore bandanas as disguises and had gloves on. Their weapons were loaded. Kevin knocked on the door, expecting Jan to open it. To his surprise, he did open the door. Laughing, Kevin greeted him, but the remaining 3 suddenly appeared, burst into the house and attacked him. They tied him up and gagged him, then began ransacking the house for money. They then tortured Jan and Quiana, trying to force them to reveal their bank card password. They also assaulted Quiana. Investigators discovered that Tyrone was the leader of the group and had orchestrated the entire plan. He gave the gun to Immerse, who then killed them. When police searched the rooms of the 4 suspects, they found evidence that all 4 were involved in the crime. All 4 were charged in the Peterzak family case, but none admitted their guilt. Quiana's mother said she never imagined that one Marine would do such a thing, let alone 4 of them. Then, detectives discovered that this was not the first time the group of Marines had committed a crime. They lived a double life, as Marines by day and criminals by night, breaking and entering and robbing. Each attack was meticulously planned. In March 2013, nearly 5 years after the tragedy at Peter's house, all 4 suspects, Immerse, Tyrone, Keeson, and Kevin, were brought to trial. Prosecutors want to prove that these Marines used their military skills to plan and carry out the crimes. The case was split into 2 trials. The first trial involved 3 suspects, Tyrone, Immerse, and Kevin, all of whom faced the death penalty. The trial for Keeson was postponed due to limited courtroom capacity. It was clear from the evidence that the crime had been carefully planned. The prosecutor presented forensic evidence at Tyrone's home. They found a pair of mechanics brand gloves. Similar to the gloves seen in the CCTV footage, the gloves contained significant amounts of DNA from Quiana and Jan. Traces at the crime scene matched all 3 defendants, Tyrone, Immerse, and Kevin. To strengthen their argument, the prosecution introduced testimony from another Marine who shared insider information that had never been made public. This Marine revealed that Tyrone and Immerse had confessed to their involvement shortly after the incident. Ultimately, Tyrone and Immerse admitted to their roles in the crime. Immerse confessed to being the shooter. Regarding their motive, they claimed their actions were driven by 2 goals: to steal money and to seek revenge. However, Tyrone asserted that he did not have a detailed plan and did not intend to kill anyone. He said his main purpose was to intimidate Jan, whom he accused of secretly obstructing his promotion. Out of a personal vendetta, after a 4-month trial and less than 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached their verdicts. All 3 former Marines, Tyrone, Immerse, and Kevin, were found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and other charges. Immerse was identified as the shooter, while Tyrone was also convicted of rape. Both Immerse and Tyrone were sentenced to death, while Kevin received a life sentence without parole on August 5, 2014. A year and a half later, Keeson Sykes was convicted of multiple crimes, including abuse of Quiana, and was also sentenced to death. It has been 14 years since the Peterzak family tragedy. Jan's mother keeps her son's dress uniform at home as a cherished memory. As it is all she has left of him, she stays in contact with Quiana's mother, and the 2 women often call and support each other. They believe they are now connected for life.